Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be continuing the red tape series here from the exploring series. We're going to be going into SCP-001 Amon Iram, all parts. This is a really long video. It's about 2.5 hours long. So I'll do my best to get through this and get it out here for you guys. It starts off the first about 25 minutes or so of this video are actually the previous Lord Blackwood video that I guess he just added to this for like context going into this. So we are going to start a little bit ahead in the video here. But yeah, I've already got that video done and up on the channel for you guys to watch, etc. So, but links will be down below as always in the description to the exploring series channel and this playlist. So do me a favor, if you enjoy this, be sure to go over there and give it a like and hit the sub button on his channel if you haven't already, and give the man some support. Makes a lot of great content for the SCP universe as well as others, so please check out the stuff that he throws out there. If you've been around the channel for a while, decided you want to take your support to the next level, there is a join button underneath the video as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. So check all that stuff out if you want to take your support to the next level. Consider leaving a like and a sub on the videos. It helps me and the channel grow. It lets the YouTube algorithm and it lets me know that you enjoy these kind of videos and this content and that you would like to see some more. So yeah, jump into the video here, guys. Again, this is SCP-001 Amon Iram by the Exploring series.
Thanks to Blackwood, the Foundation was able to recover the 6 tablets, with translations ongoing due to the extremely specific dialect of ancient Greek used. One of his journal pages, however, contains a translation of the front of the first tablet. It reads, "In the beginning, there were 3. 1,000 years before man learned of Olympus, before the extinction of the giants, before the sea had full regressed, there were 3.
Man, this is the stuff that I love, man. I've said this numerous times, like ancient mythology and just ancient history. And so the whole like Cactus verse stuff with the demons and Ada Papadopoulos and that whole like lore and ancient world building stuff, I love. Very kind of Dark Souls-ish feeling, but just in general, I love the whole idea of imagining, you know, that's what ancient times could have been like before, you know, who knows what could have happened in the story. So I'm already all about what we're getting into here, talking about, you know, the giants and the seas regressing, and there were 3. So I'm assuming they're probably going to talk about 3 civilizations, which I would assume would be the Davites, the Meccans, and the Sarkics. Either that or the gods. Could be talking about Yaldabaoth, Meccan, and maybe the Scarlet King, or something else. Or, you know, maybe there's even something that predates them that leads into them, you know, because like in the Cactus verse, LSM, I think, was the first, and then all others kind of came after him, I think, if I remember correctly, something along those lines. So I don't know, maybe there's other things that predate. I wonder if there's going to be any kind of Adam LSM references into this or not. I don't know, but let's continue.
3 great cities dividing the world tripartite. Mamjul and Korar, 2 dark fortresses resting in the jungles of the subcontinent. The magicians and sorcerer Nawabs allied themselves against the horrors of the jungle and crossed a pact with something ancient. The covenant of the Deva was born, using the first magic gifted to man. The magic of life and death.
Blood magic.
Aditum, a city thrown into rebellion by a charismatic slave.
Aditum's a city name that we've heard before. I think it had something to do with the Davites. Is that the city that was overthrown, that rebelled against the Davites? I'm trying to remember. There's so much SCP lore locked away in my brain that things get jumbled up. Anyway.
Turned lay preacher who promised wealth, freedom, and power to those that would help him. Together they threw off their yokes, slaughtered their oppressors with their new sorcery, and rebuilt their collapsed city, all under the name of the Grand Karcist Ion.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The Nalka Empire freed the second magic, Carnomancy, the magic of flesh.
Interesting.
Amon Iram, first great Ram of the Mechanite Empire, as it spread like a wildfire from the deserts.
Okay, so we're getting into the cities of each faction. Adatum was taken over by the Sarkics and became their kind of main home base. The Davites had Maj Kapoor or something like that. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. He only said it once, but they had their name, and that was where they started. And then now Amon Iram is the city, the great city that the Meccans founded.
A gleaming, shining metropolis rising out of the dunes. A center of knowledge, science, understanding that the world had never seen. The magic of machines became known. The fervor for a new god that sought to uplift men, not subjugate them.
It's kind of interesting too, right? Like, the Davites have their life and death, blood magic, I guess. Sarkics have their carnomancy. And I guess really like the Meccans' magic, if you want to call it that, is just technology, right? Science. You know, because technically, I mean, science could be considered a magic. It's just something, you know, if you don't necessarily understand it, it could be considered magic kind of thing. You know, there's that famous quote, something along those lines. So, interesting.
1,000 years before, the three great nations of men fought a war that destroyed the world. The tablets go on to clarify that Amon Iram was ruled by a theocratic cult in the area, referred to as the Mechanite cult, or the cult of the broken god.
Holy science?
No other evidence for this group.
I mean, I guess there could be a type of science that could be considered holy, depending, you know, like maybe the science of the creation of automata could be considered holy because you're giving life to a machine. You know, that could be considered holy in some regards. Some people could see that as like a miracle being done. You could claim that maybe you're giving a soul to a machine, kind of a thing.
Had been discovered thus far. An MTF, Sigma 3 Magellan men, was sent in to investigate the reality bubble and gain access to the city, if possible. They set their helicopters down a distance from the coordinates and began walking towards the location. As they closed in, they began to spread out to try and locate the bubble, but after several minutes were unsuccessful. Suddenly, one of the team's biometrics disappears, and it turns out that they had entered the reality bubble without realizing. The rest of the team enters, maintaining radio contact on the other side.
Well, I think that kind of would make sense, being that the Church of the Broken God is split into like multiple different factions. I mean, I guess like technically Sarkicism, there's two types of Sarkicism. There's, you know, the old I guess Orthodox Sarkicism, I guess you could say, if you want to call it that, and then the Neo-Sarkicism. But there's, you know, multiple factions of the Church of the Broken God, kind of with their own interpretations of the Broken God mythos and what they think Meccan wants them to do, right? So it kind of makes sense that the Mechanites might not necessarily be quite so unified.
Several hundred meters ahead of them is a massive glass and metal city, with skyscrapers hundreds of meters tall. The team briefly comments on the city's beauty before progressing in. They note that the larger skyscrapers are made of a bronze-colored metal and polished glass, while
I just want to say that that's pretty dope art. Like, honestly, that fits kind of the ancient yet technologically advanced description, kind of, you know? I wonder if this is supposed to be kind of like the floating, you know, Gardens of Babylon kind of a thing, you know? I don't know.
while the smaller buildings seem to be constructed from a blend of limestone bricks and concrete. They all exhibit an architectural style reminiscent of Islamic and Moroccan architecture, with the streets appearing to have designated sections for pedestrians and larger traffic. The team discusses this, commenting that possibly the inhabitants had some sort of anomalous cars. All of the homes are fully furnished and look as if everyone got up and left partway through dinner. One of the team hears something like a rat, but none of the others do, so they continue on. They find some large stairways leading underground, but decide not to travel down there without the mole rats MTF present.
The boys.
Eventually, they come to a heavily deteriorated section of the city, with entire sections of buildings having exploded and left to the elements. Here they find a deep hole in the ground, with a large pile of skeletons at the bottom. The team leader surmises that this was a mass grave, and they see one of the vines that Lord Blackwood mentioned at the bottom. They decide not to go down for a sample, as there are likely others elsewhere.
Probably a good idea.
Continuing on, they find many more similar mass graves, and they come up to the temple complex in the center of the city. The team comments on the grandeur of the location, despite it being only a few stories high, and they proceed to enter. The interior is an open-air courtyard with a central 30-meter statue of a man sitting on a throne. The man's face is obscured by an intricate mask, and his robes fall away to reveal a torso made of metal plating. They continue on into a central court area, featuring an oversized throne, inset with gears and swords on the opposite end. The interior of the place is vast, and the team spends an hour exploring its various staterooms, kitchens, and bathrooms. The team decides that it's getting late and they should leave, but one of the members turns to the wall and tells something that it's okay for it to come out, as they won't hurt it. A metallic skittering is heard coming from the pipes along the wall, causing the rest of the team to draw their sidearms. A metallic automaton, resembling a horseshoe crab, then gingerly peeks out of a hole in a pipe.
Interesting that it's horseshoe crab shaped, and then the Three Moons Initiative has a horseshoe crab shaped spaceship that annihilates people. Coincidence?
Slowly approaching and climbing onto the member's outstretched arm. Command tells the team that it doesn't seem to be dangerous, so they shouldn't shoot it, but don't let their guard down. The team lead is about to say that at least there's only one of them, but then a louder skittering sound becomes audible as a great number of automatons, varying in shape, start peering out from various pipes.
Interesting. So it seems like maybe the humans... I wonder if this is going to lead to a situation where the automatons rose up against the humans. The thing is, though, is right, because mechans are so technologically advanced kind of situation, and to my understanding, they, again, add, like, cybernetic implants, etc., into themselves to enhance their bodies. And I would think, like, their consciousnesses are connected, from what I understand from previous story, video, whatever. But maybe that's not like a normal canon thing, you know, because who knows what's really canon in the Foundation and what's not. I guess, you know, your own interpretation. But you would think they would have that the Mechanites would have ways of, like, kind of like the movie Altered Carbon, I guess, if you've seen it, or the TV show Altered Carbon. You've seen that, where they can, like, upload their consciousness into things. Maybe that's the case. Maybe these automatons are actually the Mechanites, and they've just uploaded their consciousness into these forms. I don't know. Interesting.
The team quickly left the city, and were not pursued by any entities. On their way out, they noted many automata milling about the city and traversing through the city's pipe system. They expressed no hostility, and several approached to investigate, although none followed past the borders of the city. The O5 Council decided to establish a long-term research outpost inside of the city, after several expeditions proved that the mechanical entities were not hostile to humans. 43 researchers were flown in.
I mean, just just think about the technology that you could learn there, the history that you could learn there, the fact that, you know, these automatons exist. They're essentially kind of like potentially a new race of creature, you know, humanoids, whatever you want to call them, some kind of new sentient race of life, you know, and who knows what other things are in there, you know. I don't know. It would just be so cool to like discover something like this.
In from various sites and departments, primarily specializing in archaeology, history, both mundane and anomalous, and paratechnology, along with a 15-man tactical response team. Since augmented personnel were relatively common with the Foundation at this time, individuals with complex prosthetics, bionics, and implants were favored due to the unexplained connection these augments have with the city. 2 co-leads were selected for the project, Dr. Robert Iram and Dr. Hedvig Nussbaum.
Robert Iram.
Iram is a senior researcher in the paratechnology department and special consultant on anomalous robotics, with a PhD in thaw mechatronics.
Interesting that the city's name Amon Iram, and he happens to be a specialist in, you know, mechanical stuff. Coincidence? Also, the one tidbit at the very start is the first time the Foundation has ever heard of these civilizations. Right.
He was previously consulting on anomalous technology recovered from Prometheus Labs, after being a former employee of the company that left over a salary dispute. He distinguished himself after being recruited by the Foundation with superior, prodigal knowledge and skill in handling paratechnology. He has also had his left arm and leg amputated following a laboratory accident at Prometheus,
Nice.
which have been replaced with high-quality anomalous prosthetics.
Yeah.
Nussbaum is a researcher with the Parahistory Division and a special consultant on anomalous cults and cultures with a PhD in archaeology. Her previous assignment was cataloging anomalous objects recovered in the possession of Lord Blackwood. She was recruited to the Foundation straight out of graduate school, eventually becoming a full researcher after discovering a complex of anomalous ruins in sub-Saharan Africa. She possesses a non-invasive ocular implant that allows for hands-free visual communication and overlay, as well as general access to Foundation databases.
Sounds fancy.
The temple complex in the center of the city was used as the base for the research center, and the mechanical entities were initially intrigued by the new arrivals before losing interest shortly thereafter.
That's kind of funny. They're interested in them for a short bit of time, then like, whatever, they're just people. They're stupid humies.
Researchers were divided into 2 groups. An engineering team led by Dr. Iram to investigate the technology of the city and the mechanical entities, and an anthropological team led by Dr. Nussbaum to investigate the history, culture, and ultimate fate of the Mechanite Empire.
Nussbaum's a name I think I've heard
A general
before.
directive was given to the entire team to avoid the subterranean portions of the city until a detachment from the mole rats could arrive to map it out.
Smart.
Both Drs. Iram and Nussbaum submit some general statements on the progress of their research. Iram's reads, "I've encountered many strange, unique things over my career at Prometheus and the Foundation, but I can firmly state that I've never seen anything quite as magical as Amon Iram. So far, we've only been able to investigate the machinery on the surface city. I'm told the real treasure is under the streets, but obviously we can't explore that right now."
Is it, I mean, I don't know, all those vines and pods down there. I'm thinking when you go down there, something's not going to go very well. We're going to have some, like, Night of the Living Dead shit.
Which appears to be largely concentrated in the upper floors of the skyscrapers, though I think calling them skyscrapers is an understatement. Each is about 500 meters, a little taller than Sears Tower. A marvel of engineering in and of itself, but not an obviously anomalous one. What they contain, however, is a different story. From my layman's perspective, they appear to be combination residential, office, and bureaucratic buildings. Each floor seems to consign itself to one of those three types and contains appropriate pieces of technology. Most are too degraded to be useful.
Mechans have their own little cubicles, desks, it's literally they have their own office space, with them writing up their own TPS reports and everything. That's what it was.
But the fact that they're there at all after thousands of years is incredible. I can discern the purposes of about a quarter of them, though. They're all anomalous to some extent. The drones are writing up detailed reports now, but they variously break laws of thermodynamics, physics, and matter conservation, and often simply use magic to do things as mundane.
It would make you wonder, though, right? Like, would a civilization like that have a need for some kind of like sporting events in general, right? Like, what would a sporting event that would be of interest to a civilization that's super advanced like this? Like, inventing something on the fly, or how fast can you create something, or putting stuff together and taking it apart, like. Or are they like super nerds? Is it like D&D? Is it like tabletop sports? You know what I'm saying? Like what would be a sport for like the Mechanites? You know what I'm saying? What would be their NFL?
Mundane as copy documents or keep food hot or cold. And of course, the automata. Little machines made of a golden metal and built to resemble animals that this culture in the middle of the desert could have no possible way of knowing about. Definitely sentient, possibly sapient, fully mechanical. I found a broken open one on the street and took it as a sample, picture attached. But demonstrating what looks to me like primitive artificial intelligence. There must be hundreds of them, at least. My guess is that they were designed to maintain the city, and for the millennia it's lain abandoned, they've been doing exactly that. They're pretty cute, to be honest. Whatever this civilization was, the anomalous was so pedestrian to them, they were using paratechnology we even now barely understand as household appliances and servants. They were playing with nuclear reactors while the rest of us huddled in caves behind the fire.
Yeah.
If this is any indicator of what lies below the streets, Amon Iram might be the key to pushing humanity into the future.
The future.
Nussbaum's report reads, I have to continually pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming. A vast city, undocumented by anyone else in the modern era, hiding a culture that had blended advanced magic and technology to settle half of Asia, while the Egyptians had yet to settle the Nile. If the evidence wasn't surrounding me, I'd call myself a liar. We've already
Interesting. I knew that the Sarkics had kind of like taken up kind of the Russian area or whatever and into some of the parts of Asia. I thought I'd remembered that the Meccans were mostly kind of like Middle Eastern area, kind of going into Europe. And that was kind of like one of the big divides back then was, the Meccans had the European side of stuff, essentially Middle Eastern European side of stuff. And then the Sarkics were, to the west of them. And the Davites are kind of, I think, to the west and the south. That's what I thought from what I remembered, but from previous stories. But interesting that maybe the Mechanites had been more established beforehand. Maybe that's what this is kind of indicating, that maybe they were so advanced and spread out at one point in time that they had basically rule over the entire kind of Asian continent as well. And then the Sarkics basically kind of drove them back, essentially, you know?
Discovered much. Some of the researchers are more interested in investigating the individual houses and homes to see what an average citizen lived like. Completely understandable. That said, I'm far more intrigued by this cult of Mechane that seems to pervade every aspect of Amon Iram. In the ruins of Sumer and other ancient cities.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting they call it a cult. And I wonder, like, was the worship of Meccan like considered like a cult practice back then? Was it not really like as great a religion back then as maybe the Church of the Broken God would want people to think it was? Maybe because of their technological advancements, maybe they didn't really believe in Meccan as a god, or in general, you know, them as a civilization. Um, Maybe they had some other kind of beliefs. Maybe they were more of a secular society than a religious society, and it just so happens that this kind of offshoot cult sprung up, worshiping Meccan. You know, I don't know. That would be pretty interesting, because in my mind, the way I have it is like this was a major belief of the Meccans. They all like believed, you know, all of them believed, the Mechanites believed in them, but maybe they weren't all just, you know, Mechanites essentially. Maybe that's just a term for those that believed in Meccan and, you know, etc.
Religious iconography is common. Here, it's ubiquitous. The palace temple is the most obvious example of this, with mechanical bas reliefs that seem to tell a creation myth laid throughout.
You know, it's kind of like Christians and Christianity, you know, like not everyone obviously in, you know, ancient Middle East or, you know, ancient times, you know, worshipped Christ, and Christianity wasn't always, you know, as great a religion as it was, kind of a thing, you know what I mean? There was in like really ancient Roman times, it was a much smaller thing, and maybe it's something similar with this, you know, maybe it was just a smaller kind of offshoot thing that eventually spread and became kind of a main religion. You know, again, kind of similar to how Christianity happened back in our own history, I guess. That'd be kind of fascinating.
The buildings, houses, shops, skyscrapers, even the machinery Robert's team is disassembling have this religious significance about them. It's especially fascinating since practically nothing else is known to us about the religion or culture of these Mechanites, beyond the admittedly questionable statements of Lord Blackwood. Even the name Mechanite.
How dare they question Lord Blackwood? How dare they?
Is a Greek epithet used in the Aegean tablets, derivative of mechane, machine. As it stands, their culture is a black box, and even with the murals and writings, I doubt we will ever have more than a passing understanding of this once great civilization and what happened to them.
I don't know. I mean, the fact that the automatons are still around, right? Like, you'd think that maybe they would have some kind of recorded information about what had happened, and they could glean it from them, you know? But maybe it's a situation where over time, you know, to prevent some kind of corruption happening, they have to dump, you know, memory, information, etc. Maybe they can only store so much before, you know, it starts eroding away at the, you know, their mechanical parts. They have to dump certain amounts of memory, so maybe it is lost. You know, who knows? Ethnic evaluation is just confused because they might have never seen technology fused with religion. True.
Obviously, we know plenty about the Mechanites and the Church of the Broken God, but keep in mind that this is a different canon, where this is the first the Foundation has ever heard of them. The detachment of the mole rats does eventually arrive in the city, and prepares to make their descent into the subterranean portions, equipped with devices that use high-frequency echoing sound waves to construct maps of subterranean areas. They descend down some fancy-looking stairs, possibly made of marble, indicating that they're likely not entering an industrial area. At the bottom of the stairs, 25 meters below ground, they enter into a stone corridor, with pipes running in every direction. The corridor is wide enough to comfortably fit all of them, and they note that there's some non-functional lights on the walls. Eventually, they enter into some sort of foundry, a huge room with lots of big machinery and assembly lines. Most of the machinery looks trashed, though, so they take some photos and continue on down a descending corridor. The air quality begins to grow worse, and the mole rats suggest gas masks if anyone is going to be heading down here. They're interrupted by a noise.
Kind of starting to sound like, some 40K hive cities, where the surface may look a little pristine, but once you get down into the underground where all the workers live, it ain't so pretty.
Coming from the pipes.
It also makes me wonder if maybe their civilization had kind of a caste system where, maybe they had like specific people and or machine creatures, technology, whatever, that specifically like worked. They were just a worker class, that lived down in their underground parts of the city that kept the city running, and that's what their purpose was, right? Because I'm trying to think of it from their perspective, like, who knows, when you integrate like technology into your being and stuff like that, like, who knows what kind of effect that could have on your idea of like humanity and emotions and things like that. And so maybe as they developed, they kind of lost some of that emotional center, I guess. I don't know what's the proper word to say, but maybe they just kind of lost some of their emotional just lost some of their emotions, and so like maybe their idea of like just creating a cast of workers or whatever. Basically, I'm just trying to say, I wonder if they got into like a caste system, and maybe that's kind of something that happened. Maybe there was their own rebellion where, the working class kind of rose up or something. I don't know. But I wonder, there's a lot of potential ways you could see a civilization like this going,
And the team lead tells them to take their safeties off, as they don't trust those crab things. They continue into a workshop of some sort, with desks and what looks like what was once paper. They pass through a number of similar-looking rooms and storage closets before passing into a hallway made of metallic pipes. Suddenly, one of the team exclaims in pain and says that their implant is acting wonky.
Implant.
Another member says that the same thing is happening to theirs, and they had asked the researchers about it, who said that the city has some sort of weird relationship with tech, and they're working on figuring it out.
You might want to back out until you figure that out then.
Part of the corridor then collapses, nearly causing one of the team to slip and fall. The section falls into the abyss below, landing with a splash. They tell Command that they've discovered the sewers and complain about the stench. It seems that the underground was for maintenance of the city, but it hasn't aged as well as the above-ground portions. The team proceeds to continue to explore for the next hour, mapping out the underground, finally coming across an area overgrown with black vines. One of the team goes to take a sample, but at his touch, the entire vine crumbles into a fine black dust. They then see, pinned against the concrete by the vines, is a human skeleton, with several vines jutting through the ribs and into the concrete. After that, they find a pod, roughly a square meter in size, sitting on a stalk. One of the team gives it a jab with his rifle, causing it to rupture and leak out a foul-smelling black liquid that dissolves the vine it comes into contact with. A highly decomposed corpse rolls out, just as it did with Lord Blackwood.
Yeah, I mean, from previous things I've heard of, that sounds very Sarkic, right? Like, I forget what SCP video it was, but there was one where they got transported to some like Sarkic world, and yeah, there were like pods. Like I think it was the Bone Orchid, right? Where you'd see these like pods and stuff in the trees. It was like fruit, they thought. And so like people were being taken and converted into that. Well, that's what I feel like this is similar to.
Continuing on, they find more victims pinned to the walls, and more mass graves. One of the team notes that the walls are all covering machinery, as they can see parts through the cracks in the metal. It's possible that the entire Undercity is a machine. They are then interrupted by another clanging sound throughout the pipe system, but this one is considerably closer. They raise their firearms, and a few seconds later, a machine shaped like a small monkey emerges from the pipes, moving past the team. At the corner of the corridor, it turns to look at them. They decide that it must want them to follow it, so they do so. They follow it for 35 minutes as it leads them deeper underground and through the facility, over large abysses and through rooms of large, complex machinery and displays. Eventually, it stops as they enter a cavernous room containing a single large object at its far end, with their location marked as being directly under the temple complex in the center of the city.
Yeah.
The object is a massive block of metal covered in gears, displays, circuitry, and vacuum tubes extending throughout the room to more machinery arranged along the walls.
Sounds like a giant computer.
At the front of this block is a vaguely humanoid figure, jutting outwards, hanging like a figurehead. A human...
Is this the Golden Throne? Is this where the Emperor actually lies? Is this ancient world actually what happened to the Imperium? Is the SCP Foundation just the Imperium after it's already been destroyed in the future?
Head, arm, and upper chest are placed on a mostly mechanical frame, and it looks upward as the team approaches with their guns raised. It opens its mouth, and a stilted, feminine voice with a digital edge booms out.
Digital edge, huh?
The voice says that they have entered the Gate of the West, Adatum's answer, the great and holy city of Amon Iram. It welcomes them and says that there is much to discuss.
Interesting.
Further questions from the team were either rebuffed or met with nonsensical statements, with it repeatedly expressing the desire to speak with the scholars, which they interpreted to mean Drs. Iram and Nussbaum. They spent the following hours mapping a path back to the surface, and after returning, researchers used the collected data to construct a 3D rendering of a significant portion of Amon Iram's Undercity. The mole rats declared that the Undercity was largely safe for exploration, barring particularly heavily corroded passages and areas infested by the vines and pods. Subsequent analysis of the pods determined...
Yeah, I mean, for me, my biggest thing would be, what are these vines and pods, right? Because, like, everything else in the city is very technological based, but this sounds like it's something that is, like, more organic. So, like, what is that? What does it mean? You know, is this how the Meccans birthed people, right? Were, like, human bodies just like a cloning? Is it like basically these pods like a cloning kind of process for human bodies, just like grown, like factory farm grown or whatever, so that they could implant their consciousnesses and technology into for them to live in? you know, when like their previous body fell apart. I don't know. Kind of sounds very Adeptus Mechanicus. I feel like the Mechans and the Adeptus. Well, I was going to say I feel like the Mechanica or the Mechanites and the Adeptus Mechanicus will get along, but then probably not because the Mechanites. Well, I don't know. I guess it would depend. Would the Adeptus Mechanicus see Mechan as the Omnissiah? That would be the determining factor, I guess, right? You know, that actually kind of brings up an interesting idea for a video.
Determined that their exterior skin is an organic but calcified substance similar to flesh. Both Iram and Nussbaum agreed to conduct an interview with the entity underground, and they were escorted by a team of tactical response officers the following day.
I mean, yeah, like is the stuff in there, is it Sarkic? Or is it part of the Mechan stuff, right? Because you would think if it was Sarkic, the Mechans would have like purged anything like that from their city. Even though like it's old and it turns to dust when you do anything with it, it still kind of almost sounds like the Mechans might have been using that as a means to, again, like raise bodies, clone bodies, farm bodies, or whatever. You know, so it sounds like it might be more Mechan based than Sarkic. I was originally thinking that, you know, maybe the Sarkics had invaded and were creating those pods as a means to like convert humans into some of the other bestial forms or whatever, but maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, unless they never had a chance to clean their city, right?
As they enter the chamber.
But I mean, at the same time, they've already stated, right, that like there are these, you know, horseshoe crab, you know, automata that are maintaining the city. So you would think they would be going through and getting rid of that stuff, but maybe they're just not capable of it. Maybe the Sarkic stuff is, I guess, immune to what those crabs are able to do, or the crabs aren't programmed or able to utilize anything to break it down. You know, I don't know.
And find the figure hanging limply from the wall. Aram's first question is if it's alive. The entity's head twitches upwards and says no, and then welcomes them.
Yikes.
His second question is what it is, to which it responds that it is, it was, and it remains, and then asks them what they are.
That is kind of foreboding. You ask it if it's alive and it says no, and then you ask it what it is and it says, I have always been and always will be. Okay.
Nussbaum says that they are scholars, here to investigate the city and its history. This causes the entity's head to go limp once again, followed by a flurry of mechanical activity in the wall behind it before it raises its head again. It then tells them that the grand, great city of Amon Iram is home to 4 academies, 16 schools, and scores of scholars and learned men, discovering, working, and blending the gifts of God. It asks what gives them the right to call themselves scholars. Nussbaum responds that anyone who seeks knowledge can call themselves a scholar, and they haven't seen anyone else since they've arrived. The entity reveals that it knows exactly when they arrived, as it has been observing them thanks to the automata around the city, which are scholars, servants, soldiers, and everything else. It has subsequently learned their language from observing the Foundation troops. It accuses them of coming to conquer the city, but Nussbaum assures it that that is not the case. The entity says that they walk in here with guards, and only generals, kings, and priests require guards. Since they claim to not be generals, they must be a king and queen. Iram asks why they couldn't be priests, but the entity says that it is a priest, and it can smell that they have no shred of God in their hearts.
Interesting.
Iram then says,
that's kind of interesting, right? So it's a mechanical being, but somehow is able to sense whether or not people have faith in something. That's kind of that honestly is pretty fascinating, right? So like, is their technology so advanced that they understand what I guess a soul is and what faith is, and that in the SCP universe, faith and belief gives power to something, and maybe their technology can actually measure that? That'd be pretty fucking crazy.
is that yes, he supposes that they are the leaders of their people. The entity then formally welcomes them to the second spire, white city of the broken empire, finger of Mecane, the Fulad throne, the great and holy city of Amon Iram. Nussbaum asks it to explain what exactly all that means, and the entity asks how long they have been unaware of the city's history. She says that she's not sure, but thousands of years at the minimum, and they didn't think anyone would still be alive. The entity goes limp again for a moment before stating that it is not alive, but it is the kiss of God, shining steel and Fulad, made in Mecane's image, and they are everything it is not. It then suddenly asks to see Iram's prosthetic arm.
Interesting. That's also kind of foreboding, because it's already like setting humans up as like a lesser than. You know, that statement there? You are everything it's not. That's kind of foreboding.
Sending one of the small automatons to examine it. Afterwards, it says that Amon Iram was a city of science and blessing, Mecane's gift to them that allowed them to construct wonderful things. Every man, woman, and child were given augmentations like Iram's arm to become something better than human.
So yeah, I think that kind of lines up with what I was wondering. I feel like those pods maybe are some kind of like growing vats or cloning vats for human bodies that they then take and augment and maybe download their consciousnesses into.
Iram tells it that the vast majority of the personnel here have some form of augment. The entity says that they are allowed entry to the city, and it will assist them in recording their history and its creations, so as to make sure they are not forgotten. It has not been repaired in many revolutions, leaving gaps in its memory, but the temple contains an inexorable record of the city's godly creation, and it will translate it for them.
Bro, I would probably not sleep for days just going through all of that information and learning about this city and its history and what it was, what it did, their everything.
Nussbaum thanks it and says that they are in its debt, but the entity responds that a fair bargain has been struck, with it showing them the history of the city and them preserving the Mechanite Empire. It then proceeded to give them a number of documents, including a basic translation guide for the city's language, coined Mechanite, to English, with some Greek bywords. They were also given a map of the Undercity, fully annotated, full schematics of various technologies found within the city, and a small mechanical device of unknown function. With all this, the proper study of the city could begin. The temple courtyard contains a number of intricate murals, with Nussbaum believing them to be the Mechanite creation myth. The first shows a scene of 3 figures wrestling in a dark void, followed by the figures falling to different corners of a slightly inaccurate map of Asia. One of the figures dominates the rest of the scene.
Is it an inaccurate map, or is that just what Asia looked like back before, you know, when all this happened?
revealed to be a massive but lithe figure dressed in golden armor. A shepherd, his wife, and his 3 lame sheep happen upon it buried in the sand, obviously wounded. The plaque underneath reads, "Before the new pantheon, before the smoke and the singing, the old gods fought their war over nothing. They wounded each other and fell, twisting and writhing, to the lowest world. Mechane, blessed be her name, alighted in the far west under the scorching gaze of the sun."
That's pretty interesting too, right? Because from all the descriptions that I've seen before, I thought it was made out that Meccan was a male figure god and Yaldabaoth was a female figure god, right? That's interesting that this is saying that Meccan is a her.
She rested in the dunes, uncovered by the flock of a shepherd, Bumaro. The second mural shows the god reaching out and touching the shepherd and his wife, causing the shepherd's missing leg to be replaced with a metal limb, and his shepherd's crook to be replaced with a spear. His wife's eyes glow gold, and large metal wings spring from her back. The sheep are armored over to resemble the automata in the city, and together they attempt to raise the god from the sand. The plaque underneath reads,
It's interesting though too, right? This creation myth, like 3 gods fought over nothing. They injured themselves and then fell to earth. And then so the Davites, the Sarkics, and the Meccans became a thing. So it's seemingly a situation, right, where these 3 gods, I would assume the Scarlet King, Yaldabaoth, and Meccan, were evenly matched for each other, fought against each other, wounded each other. There was no deciding victor. So now they've had to use humanity in their war to decide who's going to win or not. And so that's what's influenced the ancient civilizations.
reads, "Mechane drew forth her touch and raised them. Bumaro's lame leg replaced by a greave, Hedara's sight restored, and all given the form of the angels. Grateful, they sought to raise their new god from her tomb, and they failed." The last mural shows the god digging deeper, lying face down in the sand. It looks up at the shepherd and strips the armor from its massive fist, which the shepherd takes and melts down, reforging it into a suit of armor in the image of the god, and a massive throne. He returns to his village, where the people naturally submit to him. Many of them are disabled and lacking limbs, but when they return to the resting place of the god, all are given mechanical augments. They rejoice and use more of the stripped armor to construct a shining city on the god's back. The plaque underneath reads,
So Amon Iram is actually Meccan.
"She knew that the wound was not mortal, but crippling. She understood her fate and entrusted her legacy to Bumaro and his blood. He became the first blacksmith, shaping the metal of her body as she shaped life itself. He made himself in her image, and the people were awed. For their faith, they were uplifted beyond the chains of humanity, and from her stripped armor they raised the first city on the back of the sleeping goddess, Amon Iram, city of Fulad, shining gate of the west." Meanwhile, hundreds of pieces of technology were analyzed and investigated by the engineering team, although many were too degraded to be of any practical use. We're provided a handful of descriptions of some of the notable discoveries. The first are 4-meter poles inset into the ground at various intervals through the streets of Amon Iram. Each pole is topped with 6 disc-shaped objects, a meter wide, and when an electrical current is applied to the pole, the disks begin to knock against each other, emitting radio waves of unclear purpose. It's currently theorized to be some sort of conductor system for the city, possibly to create a free wireless power system.
That would make sense, right? You know, as a way of like Wi-Fi electricity. That kind of goes along the lines with what I guess some of the stuff Tesla was trying to work on back in the day and may have accomplished or not. Who knows?
Another set of objects are large, partially subterranean greenhouses, occupying a significant portion of the western district of the city. Underground copper pipes can cool and heat the greenhouses according to valves, and the greenhouses are several floors tall, utilizing novel organization and irrigation techniques. It's likely that a large portion of the city's theorized 500,000 population could have been fed thanks to these buildings. A third set is a...
I guess that's also a point too, right? Like, what would mechanites eat? Right? Do they need to eat like normal food like we would to keep their organic parts going? Or would, because you would think, right, like if they're so advanced, they probably have like nanotechnology that could replace cells and be better and more efficient than what our cells would be. So maybe as long as there's enough of this Wi-Fi power or whatever, they could just power their nanites. They don't have to eat, might not necessarily have to drink, maybe not even breathe, and their bodily functions can continue as normal. That's assuming, you know, they have something like that, but it would make sense, right?
A series of magnetically charged rails running through the city in a loop, though all the rail cars have been completely ruined.
I mean, maybe Tesla was a part of the Church of the Broken God, man. You never know. Maybe he was a high priest.
Applying a specific electrical charge allows rapid, high-speed movement through the city, with it believed to have been a hop-on, hop-off.
Well, yeah, and I mean, most of the other, like, tales of the Church of the Broken God seems like they keep their humanity, right? But they just augment themselves with technology. This seems more like it's the opposite. This is seeming more like the human parts are a means to an end, but ultimately they want to be like a fully technological being. That's what my interpretation is so far, anyway, of this story. It seems like the Mechanites in this story want to be just technology. They want to be as close to their god as possible, and like the human parts are just kind of like a means to an ends to existence, I guess. It's like a necessary evil, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't know.
Off method of mass transit at extraordinarily low overhead. The fourth are small metal shields with two switches on the handle, which, when fully powered, causes either the projection of a rapidly oscillating energy shield or a skin-tight shield that effectively renders the wearer invisible.
Interesting. So they got
the fifth are large.
They got predator technology. They got active adaptive camouflage
Constructs with two in every district, inside of which are large machines containing radioactive material. The engineering team is of the opinion that these could have been functional nuclear or possibly cold fusion reactors, supplying electricity to the city's power grid. The sixth is not entirely clear, but the engineering team believes that a significant portion of the Undercity appears to be one gargantuan machine.
You know, with this kind of advancement and with how mechanized it would be, it wouldn't surprise me if they were even beyond nuclear cold fusion kind of stuff, and maybe they were into antimatter, you know, matter antimatter reactions, kind of like how Star Trek is. Because from what I understand, again, I'm not like a physicist or scientist, but that seems to be, I mean, like cold fusion is kind of a holy grail of like energy technology, right? Because it gives us all the benefits of the nuclear fusion without all the negatives. But then antimatter reactions are on a scale that's above and beyond anything that nuclear would be able to produce, right? But at the same time, the risk of that could also be that it could be like a planetary destruction thing if something goes wrong. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe the Mechans were advanced enough to know that it was too dangerous to play with, or maybe they, you know, were able to harness that. Maybe they were that advanced.
Incorporating both mundane technology and paratechnology.
Right.
During the process of research and excavation, some of the automata led the archaeological team to a structure in the Southern District that appeared to be some sort of library or university. The metal and clay tablets found inside were remarkably well preserved, and in the basement was a large metal safe, rusted off its hinges. Within was a cache of several dozen metal cylinders measuring 10 centimeters in diameter, imprinted with mechanite writing. We're given the translation of one of these, which reads, "And the shining eye of the Empire rose as Bumaro took his anointed seat on the Fulad throne. Amon Iram rose from the sands on the back of Meccain, her pieces scattered to the 6 winds and the 5 corners of the world. As the slaves marched on Adatum in the east, and the covenants were struck in the south, so too was the holiest and the godliest of magics given freely to man under the watchful eye of the sun. And the sword of Meccain cut a swath through the world, and all those trembled in fear until they saw the light of the Ram, the greatest city of man, gifted by Meccain, but built by the hands of the workers, not the demons of the covenant or the flesh slaves. The empire swelled."
It's interesting that they give them those descriptions. The demons of the covenant, you know, the blood mages, the Davites, or the flesh slaves, the Aldabaoth. Those are very interesting descriptions of how they view those two factions. I was also noticing that line too, the watchful eye of the sun. So that is also very interesting and significant. That I wonder again, as I said before, if Assem has something in this as well. Because that's what Assem was supposed to be, kind of like the god of the sun, kind of a thing. It could just be. It could have no significance whatsoever. But who knows? I mean, someone had to have created these old gods, you know?
And the metal road ferried new people, and Amon Iram swelled from their presence. And the world was good, as Bumaro watched from his throne for his reign of centuries. And when his reign ended, and his golden body passed, the Empress Hadara wept, and the city of Amon Iram wept with her, and they rested their hope onto the air. And Hashir Bumaro grew into a wise king under the auspices of his family, and gave his arm and his leg for his empire, just as his father had done. And in that way Bumaro lived on, resting in the soul of his son, and his son's son, and so on, forevermore.
It's interesting that, yeah, that became a tradition. When you take the throne, you give up your arm and leg and have a prosthetic put in. That's pretty interesting. Okay. And so, yeah, they had this hereditary line of rulers in Amon Iram.
And the Emperor Bumaro used the throne to invoke the wisdom of his past lives, and in that way the empire conquered and slew its way into the world, and it was led into the continent and into the conflict with the other nations of man, bloody and brutal.
It sounds like this was a city that was like a mobile city, right? Like, talked about how the pieces of Meccan, again, got up and move and were scattered. And I wonder if the sword of Meccan is like an actual sword, or if that's supposed to be like a metaphor for some kind of great weapon that they used, perhaps some kind of, high, energy weapon, phaser, some kind of Star Trek shit. that they would use to wipe out their enemies. It's interesting that, like, it almost seems like, so you have this faction, which is relying essentially, it seems like, on extremely advanced technology versus the Sarkics, which are very primal driven, almost kind of like the Tyranids in a way, to like give it kind of like a 40k connection. Tyranids or the Zerg. That's what they kind of remind me of. They just are absorbing biomass. They absorb any and everything, humans, any other kind of creatures or nature, and mutate and change them to their needs to serve Yaldabaoth. Then you also got the Davites, who are these incredibly powerful mages, So you have these three different factions warring with each other with three completely different kind of evolutions and means of war. I don't know. I just find it interesting. And it makes me wonder, right? Like, with how advanced the Meccans sound, with potentially cold fusion or even something greater, and the kind of weaponry they must have had, how would the Sarkics be able, and the Davites necessarily be able to keep up? I mean, the Davites potentially, obviously, with magic, who knows what their capabilities and means could have been. They could be able to create, like, maybe they could create some kind of, magical potential nuclear level catastrophes. Maybe they were able to mess with the weather in certain way. Who knows? Who knows what, especially in the SCP universe, what their magical capabilities were, And then the Sarkics, right? Like, if they are kind of like this Tyranid or Zerg based, I don't want to say based, but kind of similar in those kind of means, where they're absorbing a lot of biomass and constantly evolving. That means potentially they could evolve ways to, again, like the Tyranids, evolve ways to deal with their technologies, adapt to it, essentially, which would then give rise to the Meccans having to constantly adapt and create new technologies. I don't know. It's just interesting to think of. It's interesting to think about. Like, how was war waged between these three factions, what it would look like, how different they are, what were their capabilities, what kind of numbers would they field in battle, if anything. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about.
Devastation. After several months of research, another interview was held with the mechanical entity underneath the city to ask some more questions. Iram and Nussbaum are joined by some other researchers, and the entity asks about them, wondering if they are their attendants. Iram says that they are, to simplify things, and the entity says that it will answer their questions. Nussbaum asks for the entity's name first, and it says that they may call it Preserver, as that is its function. One researcher asks about the strange bronze alloy that they keep finding throughout the city, which has proven to be too hard to take samples of. Preserver says that this is the Fulad, a gift from Meccain that they used to forge their swords, their technology, and their very way of life.
Some kind of advanced alloy.
It is the backbone that the Empire was built on, as it's a sign of favor from God that they were the chosen people. Every citizen was expected to know how to work and melt it, as they were a nation of swordsmen and foundries. The Fulad throne was a throne crafted by Rumaro from the first ingots of the metal, stripped from the armor of Meccain herself. It is holy beyond holiness, divine beyond divinity. Its very presence is a symbol of power, but now it sits empty in the throne room. Preserver says that it will teach them how to work the Fulad, and they should bear it well, as it was among the greatest boons gifted to their culture. They move on to asking about Bumaro, who seems to be a central figure here. Preserver says that Emperor Bumaro was the first mortal man to witness the majesty of the broken god in all her glory. The researchers recall this from the creation myth, but Preserver says that it's not a myth, but history, and Bumaro reigned for centuries, with his bloodline raising the greatest army ever known, all to bring order and justice to the world. They next ask about the other nations of man mentioned in various texts, and if they were related to the fall of the city. Preserver pauses and then simply says that it doesn't know. Sometime later, Iram and Nussbaum had a
That's interesting. It's interesting that it doesn't know. Is it that it doesn't know, or is it that it doesn't want to say because it doesn't want to seem like, even though the Meccans had all these advancements in this great city and whatnot, that they failed in what they were trying to do? You know? Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like it's like their central AI of some sort. Huh.
remote meeting with O511 to discuss their findings. The meeting takes place utilizing a virtual projection powered by the ley lines of the Earth, resembling a small asphalt parking lot in what appears to be the American Southwest. Iram says that he helped design it, and it costs a fortune to run, but O511 says that thanks to the recent improvements that have come out of Amon Iram, it now only costs a small fortune to run. Nussbaum says that they're in the process of translating the hundreds of tablets, engravings, and mosaics across the city. The vast majority are simple day-to-day affairs, all of which paint the Mechanite culture as a society that was building a metropolis of the future while the glaciers from the Ice Age were still melting. O511 says that that's all fascinating, but he wonders if they've figured out any of the city's later history, and what exactly caused the downfall of the most technologically advanced culture in the world at the time.
Maybe ever.
He also wants to know more about these other nations mentioned, the Nalka Empire and the Davite Covenant, as they must have been powerful enough to war with the Mechanites, and possibly defeat them. The research hasn't really pointed at much relating to specific locations of their capital cities, and they're still not sure how the city died. O511 guesses that the vines and pods found beneath the city are related, and Nussbaum agrees that that's quite likely. O511 then asks about Preserver, telling them that it's hiding something from them, and asks how they had artificial intelligence when the Persians were figuring out irrigation. Iram says that
I feel like this took place even before that, right? Because, I mean, this is also saying that, like, these three great nations warred with each other, and that war essentially caused a catastrophe on the world. Maybe that's what caused the last ice age or whatever, you know, who knows? But I feel like this would have taken place long before any of, like, the Persians or Greeks or anything like that were around. And like they said, I think they'd mentioned that, you know, obviously some of the Meccan stuff here is Greek related, but there's also certain mathematical equations and things like that that pertain to Islam. So it would seem that obviously a lot of these languages and nations and, you know, various cultures have their roots from the Meccan civilization.
that's far from their only breakthrough. And if the Foundation could harness their cold fusion technology, their bionics, their power systems, any one of them could change the world.
No kidding.
O511 isn't so sure, as for all they know, their technology led to their downfall.
I also feel like it's a situation where the Preserver is willing to share their stuff because this is how he wants to restart the Meccan civilization. once the technology is embedded in human civilization, they will essentially just become mechanites, right? Because from what I understand, again, from other, and again, these are from other videos, so it might have not be related, but mechans essentially are connected through like a Wi-Fi connection, you know? So there's not really, it's like the Borg. They're like a hive mind situation. There's really not like individuality. Or at least they have some individuality, but they are still connected with each other. So I feel like it would be a situation where once their technology starts getting integrated into people, it will take them over again, kind of a situation, and restart the Meccan civilization. Yeah.
He is willing to continue to supply Aram and Nussbaum with whatever they need to continue their research, however. When Aram says that they believe they'll need 200 additional personnel, though, 0511 says that that's not quite something he can make happen with a snap of his fingers, but they'll have them within 2 months.
05 council member, what are you talking about?
Aram then asks for...
How are you an 05 council member and say that? You're like, literally, you snap your fingers and then shit happens. What are you talking about, brother?
Permission to see if they can't get certain aspects of the city working again, such as the power grid. They think they could get it back online within the month with Preserver's help, and it would help them learn more about the machinery. 0511 hesitates, but grants the permission, telling them to stay safe, as they're working blind here.
Yeah, no kidding.
The additional personnel and requisitions arrived sometime later, necessitating the expansion of their research base into another skyscraper in the city's southern district.
And I mean, again, like, you're dealing with an artificial intelligence or some other kind of intelligence, computer related, technologically related. Maybe it is a consciousness of some person that has been transferred into a computer. Who knows? But regardless, it calls itself a preserver because that's what its function is, to preserve the city and the Meccan civilization. So, like, with that in mind, its function is to want to preserve and rebuild it, I would think. So, like, you got to think there's ulterior motives for it here. It's sharing its technology. I mean, like, think about if we, as you know, there's plenty of you know, tribal societies still out there in the world, some that are still just being discovered. They're, you know, still using spears and bows and arrows and things like that, right? Like, how would they even be able to fathom and understand some of the technologies that we have were we to give it to them? Like, even some basic stuff like, you know, cell phones, computers, like, they wouldn't even have a way to necessarily understand what it is or potentially integrate it into their way of life, let alone then giving them weapons and bombs and nuclear technology like we have today. So, like, you got to also think, like, from the preservers, like, point of mind, it's the same thing, right? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of technology that's far more advanced that they would have that could be utilized against it were it to give it to us. So it's not just going to give us technology like willy-nilly that we could just turn around and use against it. It's going to probably have fail safes to shut that technology off, or it's doing it in a way so that it can convert us to Meccans. That's my opinion. Anyway. I feel like that's what it would be trying to do.
The disused rail system was brought back online to connect the two sites, which necessitated bringing the power grid and reactors back online, using technical assistance from Preserver and its automatons. The first two reactors that were brought online provided power to the entire western and southern districts of the city, allowing the usage of lighting, air conditioning, and of the rail system. Aram and Nussbaum returned to Preserver afterwards, prompting it to remark that they are repairing its city. It also notes that there are a lot more people here now, settling into the ruins, and they are permitted to do so as they are assisting its city. Nussbaum then asks for some more information about the city's history, asking if it remembers anything about the end of the Empire. It pauses and says that it does not have the answers they seek, as its memory is fragmented. It remembers little more than hazes and flashes, images of sitting at the market and waiting for its mother, playing with other children, and crying as its brother fixed the welds and screws on its leg.
Interesting.
Iram surmises that Preserver was not always like this, and was human, but Preserver says that it was better. It was a mechanite. It knows that it was not always in this form, but it doesn't remember who it was and how it came to be like this. It remembers the sky cracking as the walls came down, and the lancemen held back the tide of monstrosities and vegetation so that they could escape to the Undercity.
Monstrosities and vegetation. I mean, that sounds Davite, right? Like, from what I understand, Davites created these like tree ant creatures. I mean, monstrosities could also be Sarkics, though. Perhaps there was an alliance of Davites and Sarkics at some point in time. I don't know. Interesting, though. So, obviously, it was witness to the fall of the city.
It then says that it can help them find its history, as the Fulad throne is capable of taking special cylinders imprinted with memories and feeding them into the throne's occupant.
Interesting.
They've already found some of these cylinders, so all Iram has to do is sit on the throne and have someone plug them in. All that is required is the fist, an heirloom of the Imperial family that allows them to use the throne. The throne is one of the most mystical and powerful artifacts ever created.
I'm just straight up getting Emperor vibes here from, you know, this is some 40K referencing here. That's all I got to say about this.
So the fist ensures that only those who were meant to sit on it could use it. Preserver had already given them the fist. The strange...
Yeah, I don't know. It's just sus, man. Like, obviously, it feels like the Preserver is wanting them to bring the city back online. You know? It very much feels like, I mean, if your name is the Preserver, your job is the preservation of your city. Obviously, they want to bring it back online, but it just feels like... It feels like there's going to be more to this, right? It feels like there's a darker motive behind him, you know, giving all this technology to us, kind of a situation.
Mechanical device that they didn't know what to do with. Preserver gave it to them so that they might learn the city's history and retell it to Preserver. The throne was immediately inspected afterwards, now humming with power thanks to the power grid being online.
Would it even... Would anyone... Because the throne was made for Brumari, right? And his bloodline, if anyone tried to use it that was not of his bloodline, would they be able to use it? Was it made so that anyone with the fist could just use it? Or does it have to be specifically someone from his bloodline, you know?
A port was found in the left armrest that would fit the cylinders, while the right contained a depressed section molded around the grip of the fist. Nussbaum isn't so sure about letting Iram sit in the throne and plug himself in, but Iram trusts Preserver. And they don't have many options if they want to figure out what happened.
I mean, it's true, right? You don't have a whole lot of options. I would be tempted. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the idea of learning the history, and especially a situation where it's like you could almost literally relive the history through memories, right? Like, kind of like Assassin's Creed style with going in the Animus. It would be hard not to. But at the same time, like I said, man, you know, Zinch would be the chaos demon that I would probably fall to, because I just have that curiosity and thirst to want to know. So I would be super tempted to do this for sure. But I don't know. There would definitely be a part of me that wouldn't trust the Preserver and what's going on here.
They activate the throne, causing Iram's eyes to fill with a pale golden light, and his spine arches. He writhes, wordless.
And it's like, again, is it a situation where maybe Bamari's consciousness is kept in the throne and he never really dies? And when his sons, sit on the throne, he's actually inhabiting their bodies. And so if you do this, do you essentially just die and Bamari takes over your body? You know what I mean? I feel like that would be a distinct possibility.
In the throne, gasping, and exclaims that he can see it. Nussbaum begins to call for them to shut down the power, but Iram shouts that he can handle it as he continues to writhe before abruptly ceasing.
Captain America vibes
He
here.
says that it's beautiful. He is standing on the palace balcony facing the eastern district as the sun is rising. He can see all of the buildings, although there's no skyscrapers, and the city is in perfect condition. The streets are bustling with activity, and all of the people have bionics of some sort. Suddenly, he sees himself sitting in some sort of car, surrounded by guards carrying swords and some sort of primitive gun. The window is rolled down, and people are offering things to him: bread, wine, fruits, and gifts. One is an oil painting of a man, and Iram realizes that it is Bumaro, and he has seen this through Bumaro's eyes. Half of his body is Fulad, and he's speaking in Mechanite, but he can't understand it. They're back in the palace, and he's on the throne, as soldiers and generals pore over a massive map of Asia. There's lines drawn everywhere, and there's 3 big circles, one in Egypt, one in India, and one on the Chinese coast. All of them are yelling and arguing, but he looks to his right and sees a beautiful woman wearing a golden mask, with an intricate set of golden, metal-feathered wings on her back. There's also a little boy next to her, and he realizes that this is Bumaro's wife and child. He turns back to the generals and nods, speaking in Mechanite, which is later translated as, "The Covenant go too far. Prepare the Golden Legion." The light then fades from Iram's eyes, and he slumps over unconscious as...
Isn't the Golden Legion also something that was in Hellboy, one of the Hellboy movies? Maybe I'm mistaken, but that sounds kind of familiar from something else.
Medics are called. He was found to have a slightly elevated blood pressure and heartbeat, but was otherwise fine, expressing a closer interest in the archaeological team's findings in the following days. Another document recovered from the city is translated and provided for us, reading, "And the sweep of the Golden Legion took 3 long centuries of expansion, as the Mechanite Empire's legates established beautiful, harmonious dominion on the oases and villages of the world. And as they expanded, they found relics, artifacts sheared from Mecane during their god's fall from heaven, scattered over the earth. And with each relic carried back to Amon Iram, the fervor of the people grew and grew as their leaders rose, warred, and died for their heirs. And as the Legion marched forward over those long centuries, 2 other nations of man marched. The Covenant of the Deva rode forth on their great, horrible spirit beasts, searing a path through the jungle from their twin city of Mamjul Karar. And they used their black magic to open a gap, stepping from one side of the continent to another, and those that went through established another city, Adatum, that would after another 2 centuries fall to its own slaves, branding themselves the Nalka. And all these parties marched into Asia, only vaguely aware of the existence of the other 2 until the Battle of Harumar, where they collided. The existence was an affront. The disgusting flesh beasts of the Nalka an insult to the steel glory of Mecane, and the Covenant's plant spirits choking and infesting the gears and wheels of the Legion. And so the Legion fired the first mortar, shattering the Covenant's ranks, and thus began a war that would end with the destruction of Asia.
Damn.
The First War raged across the continent in every...
Peter Jackson, can we get some Lord of the Rings videos, movies going into this, please? That would be dope.
Every theater. Fleets of golden-hulled warships constructed in Amon Iram and pushed downriver to encounter the Covenant in the bay. The Nalka raised an army of the dishonored dead from Adatum and marched them ceaselessly to throw themselves in the front line, choking the vines of the sorcerer Nawabs. There were no laws in war, and there was no honor in death. Every corpse was fodder for future battles. Forests were scorched during retreat to deny the Covenant's seed, and the warriors of the Nalka and Covenant chose to throw their weapons in the sea rather than surrender the precious metal to the foundries of the Legion.
Damn.
And the Colossi, great thousand-armed tall Goliaths of steel and bronze and foulad that rent the sky down upon the Nalkan hordes. Every second man was killed in the fighting, and it raged for 300 years and would have gone on forever until the Abominate landed his ships on the western coast of Ethiopia and began his march to Amon Iram.
The Abominate.
Devastation.
I wonder, is the Abominate supposed to be referenced to 610? You know, is that their ultimate weapon that ended up taking out the Meccans?
So, as mentioned, this is a completely new canon related to the Church of the Broken God, the Sarkites, and the Davites. Their origins have always involved conflict, but here we're getting an intimate look at exactly how the Mechanites operated and waged war. This is a lot of technology to have simply disappeared over time, and it's clear that Preserver knows a bit more than he's letting on. Despite the relative peace and quiet that the Foundation has experienced so far in Amon Iram, there's an underlying sense of dread about the dead city. More of the city's secrets and its past will be revealed in Part 2, so stay tuned.
Okay. Alright. I mean, we could end there and pick this up tomorrow or Wednesday, or we could continue on a little bit more. What do you guys want to do? What do you guys want to do? I'll leave it up to you. There's another hour and 5 minutes or so left in this video, I think. So, I mean, we could end up going on to like 8:30, 9 o'clock tonight my time, potentially. You're here for writing it? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Let's go. We'll continue. We'll get this here done tonight. Let's go. Part 2.
SCP-001, Amon Iram, Part 2. A city discovered in the desert contains relics from a past civilization. While that's a simple enough premise, one even grounded in reality, the discoveries that the Foundation has made in the lost city of Amon Iram are truly startling. The people that lived there, the Mechanites, were dealing with massive mechs and cold fusion reactors at a time when most of the world was just figuring out basic technology. Doctors Aram and Nussbaum were sent in to try and figure out what happened here and the extent of their technology. But, as usual, the rabbit hole continues to get deeper. Let's continue.
Let's.
When we last left off, Dr. Robert Aram had just finished using the throne in the center of the city for the first time, allowing him to revisit memories from Emperor Bumaro's past. A week later, he volunteered to use the throne once more, citing his quick recovery and how much information they could glean from the past. Dr. Nussbaum and her team have figured out a rough chronology of the cylinders, so she wants to try and test one from roughly the middle, to try and see if they can learn more about the Nalka and the Davites before the chaos of war.
Interesting. I assume the Nalka are the Sarkics. So that's also pretty interesting, right? So that they weren't called the Sarkics then. So at some point in time, maybe the Sarkics were some kind of religion or belief system that split off from them into what it is now. Who knows? But that's also kind of fascinating.
Iram says that he can't control what he sees, but Nussbaum suggests that he probably can, as the throne wouldn't be that useful if future generations couldn't specify what they wanted to learn. That being said, she has no idea how he can control it, so he's thrown in blind once again. The memory begins in a stone city in the desert, but it isn't Amon Iram. Iram deduces that it's along the Nile River, and that he's actually in the city of Thebes, in Egypt. He's Bumaro once again, sitting at the head of a caravan of large, beetle-like automatons. They arrive in the city and meet with the pharaoh, whom they exchange gifts with. Soon they dismiss all of the servants, and the pharaoh asks Bumaro if he can expect his support against the Abominate.
You know, it's also interesting to me, right? Like, I wonder how the Meccans would view just normal humans. Would they be indifferent to them? Would they treat them, I guess, like any other kind of civilization? Some would be allied, some they might have trade agreements with, some they might be enemies, right? But, like, because humans are essentially kind of like a component for the technology that is kind of what makes them Meccans, right? Like, would they go out to other civilizations that are just human civilizations and, like, essentially conquer them to make them part of their populace? You know what I mean? Because, like, would they see that as them, you know, spreading the word of their god, and enlightening, you know, humanity, etc.? Because it could also be, like, thought of as a tactic that, you know, you're taking away slaves from the Davites, you're taking away biomass and whatever else from the Sarkics or the Nulka by doing that. So I would think that that might be a legitimate tactic that the Meccans would do, try to get to normal humans first, expand their numbers and influence, etc., in their borders. But from this, it sounds like they kind of left other civilizations alone or had treaties or whatever, because he's talking to Egyptian pharaohs. And I would think, right, that, like, pharaohs of Egypt at that time, maybe they were an advanced civilization, in some ways, you know, maybe they did have kind of their own, maybe the Egyptian pantheon was real in some ways, and they had their own anomalous powers and benefactors or whatever, and so maybe they were able to, in their own other ways, defend themselves or be seen as somewhat of an equal in certain ways to some of these other, you know, cultures, etc. You know, I don't know, but I guess is indifference. They're the real empires, like less human kingdoms below. Like no one can challenge them whatsoever. I don't know if Egypt existed at this point, but maybe. I mean, he's talking about right now that Bumaro is talking to the Egyptian pharaoh. So
Bumaro responds that his army is already spread thin to enforce peace on his land, and he cannot afford to be involved in his affairs. The two begin to argue and shout, with the pharaoh stating that the Abominate is marching on Amon Iram. He will cut a swath through Egypt and stack their corpses to build a bridge across the Nile. Bumaro refuses to help and leaves, with Iram asking why the pharaoh doesn't understand, as there are bigger things at stake. The scene shifts to a different throne room, with Bumaro facing a man in a robe and turban, possibly Arab or Ottoman. The man shakes his head, and the scene shifts again to a tent facing a tribal chief. They're discussing establishing trade routes, selling the foulad, the technology, but the chief doesn't want to get involved with the war and risk the Nalka or the Covenant.
That's also interesting that they'd be willing to just sell it. Again, is that a way for them to spread their influence? Would that Falad, once it like integrates with something with humans, again, kind of convert them to Mechans? Like that's what my thought process is, right? Is that kind of metal, because it is from Mechan itself, right? Well, then like I almost feel like, again, it's a Borg kind of system or situation. Like anyone who gets like this Fulad integrated into them becomes a part of Mecham, and they're all kind of really like one big organism. Like all these humans are basically kind of like cells of the Mechan body or something like that. So like if they were to sell it off and spread it to other human civilizations, would they then get integrated that way? Which would be a much easier way of, I guess, integrating other cultures into the Mechans, as opposed to what I was talking about earlier with them setting out and trying to like physically conquer them. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be interesting.
The scene shifts again to a ruined city surrounded by a jungle on fire. The sun is setting, the smoke's thick in the air, and Bumaro is standing on a bluff in front of his soldiers. The soldiers are lobbing firebombs and mortars into the city and scaling the walls, with Iram commenting that the defenders look almost Indian. There's some kind of ghosts or spirits swirling in the air as well. The soldiers are bringing down the walls and slaughtering the enemy. He looks behind him to see the female general wearing dragon armor, and he gives her a nod. She proceeds to scream and charge down the bluff, the giant metal armor suit leading the charge as they shatter the enemy line. The general holds up her sword as lightning strikes it, and the battle becomes a massacre. Later, Bumaro is in the city itself on his mount, surveying the ruins. He looks to the general and sees himself reflected in her helmet, no more than 25 years old. He sees survivors crawling across the dirt, and the general steps on one's head, causing some sort of flame spirit to burst out along with the man's brains.
Interesting.
Nussbaum asks,
it seems like the Davites would like possess people.
Asks Iram to focus on Amon Iram, and soon he's back there, standing in the palace. He sees that the city is militarized, with guards in the streets and turrets on the walls. He's speaking to an engineer, asking if Mechan's Kiss is ready. The engineer feels confident about it, and the Undercity has been retrofitted to fit all of the components. He then sees in the distance gigantic mechs, 200 feet tall, with 4 legs and 2 arms. He can see 3 of them, enforcing a perimeter around the city, and Iram says that this isn't a war, it's an apocalypse. Nussbaum says that it's probably time to take a break, so they unplug him from the throne. She then asks him when he learned to speak Mechanite and Egyptian, but he has no idea. Afterwards, research began to take a special priority on war records and weapons technology that may have been left behind. Over the course of the following weeks, records of manufacture and shipment for thousands of ammunition and supplies were translated, revealing a scale of war production previously considered impossible in antiquity, and rivaling the war output of developed nations in the modern era. Additionally, the mentions of Mechan's Kiss and it possibly being an extremely powerful superweapon incited a new flurry of research into the components and devices in the Undercity. One of the engineers investigating Mechan's Kiss writes a memo to Dr. Iram discussing the findings. It reads, "I understand you're recovering from extended experimentation with the throne. Not to disturb your rest, but the team thinks we've come up with a solid theory on what the device under the city, the Mechan's Kiss, is." Just some background context. Some of the geologists that came in during the second wave of personnel made some interesting but, at the time, irrelevant discoveries, amounting to the revelation that the sand within SCP-001 is of a slightly different chemical composition to the sand outside it. The sand inside is more similar to a kind of white sand found in a section of the Arabian Desert, several hundred miles to the northeast. We didn't know what to make of it, but the recent research into the
I think that means that the city's mobile.
Undercity has changed things. We've mapped out the whole device. It occupies 65% of the Undercity's volume. Practically everything is connected to it that isn't stuff like the sewers. Its components have also become more understandable with our new experience on mechanite design, architecture, and philosophy. The technology is antiquated, but it's almost all paratech. Extremely powerful conduits, converters, connections, etc., all terminating in a small chamber emitting extremely high levels of radiation.
Typical.
We sent a protected probe in, warding it. It melted a few minutes later, but we ran the pictures and energy signals against the database and got nothing. We've never seen anything like it. But then, TENS decided to call in a few favors and run it against the GOC database. Apparently, they have seen something like it, and tried to weaponize it. A long-distance, large-scale matter D/reconstructor and emitter. A gigantic teleporter, basically.
Oh, I thought this might have been something related to, like, the ontokinetic weapon that, like, kills the gods, kind of a thing. I thought this was going to be kind of like, what if Mechan's Kiss was their version of that back then?
Apparently big enough to move an entire city hundreds of kilometers. Mechan's Kiss isn't a super weapon, it's a Hail Mary. Unfortunately, it's completely burned out.
Yeah.
It'd require a team months to get it back into remotely working order, and that's ignoring the problem of power. It's way too demanding to pull from the city's power grid.
So, I mean, obviously, that's how the city ended up in its own little pocket dimension, essentially. Is it like maybe the Mechan's Kiss teleported and it malfunctioned? You know, it didn't go exactly as they planned. And so it's like stuck in between dimensions or something like that.
Grid. We think it draws directly from the cold fusion reactors, which is another impossibility. Plus, we still don't know how it was controlled, or how any of the computation works without, well, computers. In any case, I don't think Amon Iram will be teleporting anywhere soon. We're then provided another translated document from the city, which reads, "And in the 60th year of the war, as the fighting reached a crescendo, and Thamud burned with the shelling of the Legion on the flesh hordes of the Nalka, the matriarch of the Covenant and the Grand Karcist Ion met under the shadow of night in the black catacombs of Adytum. And there they came to understand a truth. Bitter enemies though they might be, the flesh of the Nalka and the plants of the Covenant were an extension of each other, both extrusions of the natural world. Evenly matched, neither could truly destroy the other. But the mechanite, blessed steel, was something else. A gift from the sky, well capable of crushing each of them. But together, they stood a chance.
So they forged an alliance.
And such it was, that as the invasion plans were drawn, and the great siege engines were constructed, and the pole arms cooled in the foundries, the Golden Legion marshaled and marched themselves, beginning the long, bloody trek to Adytum. And as they crossed through the desert of Asia, the Nalka were lending their forces to another invasion, this one raised by the sorcerer Nawabs with the Deva against Amon Iram. A black, wicked army secretly gathering in the jungles of the south, marching on the suddenly vulnerable first Ram of the Mechanites. And with them came the magics. The Nalka offered one of their greatest boons, a plague to infest the city. And the Covenant offered the Song of the Deva to make the verdant greenery of the desert rebel against its masters.
Yeah.
And even
That's where the
then,
vines
their
came
marshaled
from.
forces were not enough to dominate the Colossi and take the city. But in the far west, beyond the gate, another storm was brewing. The Abominate, may his name never be spoken of, stood on the shores of the coast as the damned fleet disembarked from their massive ships. And his army assembled itself from his prisoners and his soldiers, and the march to the east to Amon Iram began. The city settled between two unstoppable forces, neither aware of the other's presence, as the two armies pushed to the walls of the city and the head of its king, queen, and general. So, as the Mechanite army marched on Adatum, the capital city of the Sarkites, the newly formed coalition of the Sarkites and the Davites marched on Amon Iram.
Typical.
The Sarkites provided a plague to infest.
This happens all too often in StarCraft, man. I'm telling you, you end up just base trading. And then everyone's got to start over. Then it kind of becomes like a DPS race of who can kill what base first, while the other one's moving their base around and building up again. Happens all the time.
The city, which could very well have been SCP-610 or any other number of Sarkite anomalies,
610, yeah.
And the Davites provided some of their anomalous mastery over botany. They still couldn't take the city, though, until the city was besieged on the other side by a separate force, led by the Abominate. Who or what the Abominate is remains to be seen, but their true name has been completely stricken from the record. Another meeting with...
Wonder if that was, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. But that other SCP Sarkic video we got into about one of the, like, Sarkic general beings or whatever, where they found its body and it was, like, resurrected. I can't remember what its name is. But I wonder if that's who, like, the Abominate was in the story.
With 05-11 was scheduled to discuss the new discoveries, but the day before the meeting, an unidentified aircraft was detected near the city. The plane was radioed for identification as it approached, and it responded with valid Overwatch Command credentials. It ended up landing, allowing 05-11 to disembark, accompanied by MTF Alpha-1, Red Right Hand. Nussbaum and Iram rushed to the city to greet him, surprised that he would make a personal visit to the city. 11 says that he's heard so many great things about this city so far that he had to see it for himself.
If I was on the O5 Council, I would come and see it for myself. I couldn't not. I would want to sit on the throne, man. If I was an O5 Council member, I'd be sitting on the throne, reading it like a book, dude. Going through all the memories, brother.
He admits that it does look a lot nicer now that they've started to rebuild it. Iram tells him that they've managed to get primary power back online, along with the train system and the climate control. They're working on getting the weaponry back online soon as well.
It's interesting, though, that, like, of course, so far from the story's perspective, we're hearing everything from the Mechanites' point of view. And they're kind of seen as, like, the good guys going out there spreading technology and enlightenment to the world, trying to fight back the Nalka and the Davites and their savagery. But maybe it was the opposite. Maybe the Mechans were actually the evil conquerors and the other two were defending themselves, and maybe that's kind of like the flip we'll see in the story eventually. Because it feels like at some point in time, something foreboding is going to happen that's going to be bad. I'm just waiting for that other shoe to drop, you know?
05-11 asks Nussbaum about the recent breakthroughs in relation to the throne, which Iram is the primary test subject for. Iram responds that they've done a dozen tests since they discovered it, while only a handful have turned up anything substantial. It's mostly fragmented memories from old kings, either the streets filled with citizens or visions of battlefields. Nussbaum says that they've translated over 100 tablets so far, but most are simple correspondence. The recent ones, however, have been far more interesting, and the group heads to Nussbaum's office to examine them. 05-11 comments that he expected more of a sparse military setup here, but she seems quite comfortably set up. Since they've been here now for nearly a year, they've had plenty of time to settle in. Nussbaum says,
It's also interesting we're not really hearing anything more about the automaton in the city helping them, interfering with them in any way, whatever, just doing whatever they're doing. I don't know. I feel like we should hear more about, I just feel like we're not hearing anything more about anything like that. You know what I'm saying?
that they've made great strides recently in determining the fate of Amon Iram and the Mechanite culture at large, thanks to the translations, the throne, and some limited help from Preserver. It's been established that the Davites hail from the Indian subcontinent, and the Nulka are likely from Central or East Asia. The later records, however, mention a fourth party, the Abominate, and so far they know practically nothing about them, only that they possessed a fleet of seafaring vessels, and likely hailed from West Africa.
Interesting.
05-11 finds it a little hard to believe that an army crossed the entire breadth of the Sahara 4,000 years ago, but it's hardly the strangest thing they've encountered here.
Well, and I mean, sometime around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, to my understanding, the Sahara Desert wasn't a desert. It was supposedly a rainforest-like situation, so they wouldn't have been crossing a desert potentially at that time.
Nussbaum also says that they have reason to believe that the Gobi Desert was a significant theater in the First War, suggesting that the three primary cultures had some experience warring in deserts. 05-11 asks why they don't include the Abominate as one of the primary cultures, and Nussbaum says that they're not even sure if they're human yet, let alone a distinct culture group. The Aegean tablets that led them here didn't mention any fourth party in the First War, but
I wonder if the Abominant are another kind of Meccan-based society, right? But maybe they believe in something different. Maybe they call them the Abominate because they see it as an abomination or affront of their beliefs of Meccan, and maybe these Abominate people just believe or worship or use the technology of Meccan in another way, because again, these different body parts of Meccan have been scattered throughout the world, so maybe they found another one and established another society based on this technology, and again, there are several different branches of the Church of the Broken God that have their own beliefs and don't necessarily see eye to eye, so maybe that's what the Abominate are. Interesting.
But some colleagues of hers researching the mundane Thamud culture in the Northwest recently unearthed a trove of tablets. They apparently detail a cataclysmic battle between 4 armies for control of a major city. They're hoping to have full translations ready within the month, but so far they believe that the Abominate was the main reason that the city itself fell, not the Nulka and Davite coalition. This worries 05-11, but there's nothing they can do now but wait for the translations. Moving back to Iram, he says that they've discovered a lot of military weapons, ranging from polearms and swords to what seem like primitive chainsaws, to long-range shoulder-mounted mortars.
They had chainswords, dude, I'm telling you. This is the Imperium, and the SCP Foundation is actually just what happens after the fall.
And elephant guns. They've also found a few interesting things in the Undercity, such as a few suits of functional power armor, which enhance strength, speed, durability, power, and some of them are even flight capable.
Yep.
But none of them are
I'm convinced this is actually the history of the Imperium. Just, yep, it is known.
are usable without the mechanite implants
Nose
to
is
link
itchy.
to. A few days later, though, Preserver directed them to another chamber in the Undercity, filled with assembly lines, industrial sections, and crates filled with mechanite implants. These implants included foulade and steel bionic arms, legs, prosthetics, torso cages, heads, and, of course, sensory implants, just like Foundation ones. Iram wants to test them on some D-Class. 0511 says that he
D-class
cannot
super
approve
soldiers.
of outfitting D-Class with millennia-old cybernetics and putting them inside of highly destructive mech suits. Iram
Yeah, you don't want to make D classes into super soldiers that can just then break away and do whatever the hell they want. You know what I'm saying? That would be an interesting SCP story, though, about a D class that happened to. They experimented on a D class. He became some kind of super soldier, super anomalous weapon, broke out of the Foundation, has been on the run, and the Foundation trying to catch him. That'd be interesting.
Accepts this, but says that in the meantime, he'd like to see if the city's defensive systems still work, the mechs and gun emplacements. 0511 still doesn't trust the visions completely, and is wary of placing any faith in the technology here. If what Iram says is true, though, there's at least two super weapons here that the Foundation could deeply benefit from, the Colossi and the Teleporter. Iram considers correcting 0511 and saying that the Teleporter isn't a super weapon, but instead says that he'll need plenty of supplies, as he wants to.
I mean, I don't know, right? Like, if you could teleport an entire army from one place on the planet to another instantly, that's kind of a super weapon, you know? That's kind of a super weapon.
To bring the cold fusion
These guys got the chronosphere from Red Alert, you know?
reactors online. This is a big request, and one that 11 thinks is quite dangerous, as they still don't even know what destroyed the city, and they might end up blowing it up. Iram counters that they've already mastered most of the tech they've discovered, and they have Preserver to assist them. Discovering the city's defenses and how effective they are is crucial to getting an accurate image of the battle. Iram asks Nussbaum to back him up on this, and although she hesitates, she does support it. 11 says that if both of them are in agreement, he can make it happen, but tells them to be safe and to not take any needless risks. Sometime later, Iram writes in his personal log, discussing their progress with the cold fusion reactors. It reads, "Progress on rebuilding the cold fusion reactors is progressing much, much faster than projections. Normally, I'd be worried, but I'm surprisingly calm. It's obvious. Our people are getting familiar with the technology. The Foulade foundries are operating at amazing efficiency. We've worked out how to mold and shape the metal just how we need it, and what last year looked like a bizarre, nonsensical circuit structure and design philosophy now strikes me as beautifully idiosyncratic. A snapshot into a bygone era. I've never really been one for history. More of a STEM type. I never looked down on those that pursued history, I just didn't see the attraction. Machines are in front of you, something tangible you can see and hear and touch and interact with. You can't do that with history. Not really. The Foulade throne, of course, has changed that. I've spent lifetimes of ancient emperors in minutes. It's staggering. The depth of emotion and personality you can feel from only a few choice minutes in someone's body. Their grief, pain, joy, their story. Fascinating stuff. The technology of the throne and any possible side effects remain elusive, but we've been testing it for a few weeks now, maybe a dozen times. And while I'm always tired after, not a surprise at my age, I feel fine otherwise. And now I know Mechanite, Greek, and Egyptian. Go figure.
That'd be handy.
I've gotten a front seat view to the First War, and it is apocalyptic. There's really no other word for it. Gigantic mech suits crushing cities as the sky itself opens up. Spirit demons fighting alongside human compatriots. Metal.
I mean, listen to that. They're conjuring chaos demons. We got, Imperial Titans fighting here. Dudes in Terminator armor. This is straight up 40K.
Soldiers charging walls. Insanity. A secret, bloody history the world doesn't even remember. But, as with all war, it's not quite so black and white. Being inside Bumaros, or the various Bumaros bodies, none of them were tyrants or dictators. Maybe
it's interesting that he just said the various Bumaros bodies. So I wonder if that kind of leans towards what I was saying earlier, where, every time he dies and one of his sons takes his place, that he's actually putting his consciousness back into one of their bodies. Maybe eventually, if enough of the memories from Bumaro get put into them, they actually just become Bumaro, which could be what's happening to the professor, the researcher here, Amon.
Maybe autocrats, but what emperor wasn't? They all wanted to protect their people, to raise them to something beyond human. I can't help but sympathize. Nothing impresses onto you the fragility of your body than nearly losing it, but they understood that and actively improved themselves using the bionics and implants.
I understood the weakness of my flesh. That meme just popped in my head when he says that.
Reach heaven through transhumanism. Speaking of implants and bionics, the cache we discovered some weeks ago, along with the Legion armor. 0511 denied D-class testing. It's frustrating. We can't use the glorious technology here to improve the world. We can't use it to improve ourselves. We can barely use it to improve the damn city. It's devastating, and most of the team agrees with me that we should use it. So we did. I can't use D-class to test the implants.
He's gonna use himself.
But using myself is a different matter.
Yep, here it goes.
The new arm is wonderful. It's smoother, more responsive, more sensitive and durable, and it doesn't even hurt at the end of the day. I can sleep with it on. 99% of our personnel in Amon Iram are already augmented, so changing out their stainless steel arm for a Foulad one or something is no big deal. Why should 5 be the only one that reaps the gifts the Mechanites left us? About a month later, Dr. Nussbaum and 4 members of the archaeological team were excavating a number of mosaics in the Undercity, progressing into an unstable section. The ceiling overhead suddenly gave way, with the archaeological team members escaping largely unharmed thanks to strength-enhancing bionic and cybernetic augments. Unfortunately, Nussbaum sustained severe internal and external injuries and was rushed into emergency surgery.
And was then going to have
Her
those
injuries
implants put into
included
them.
a shattered collarbone, fractured spine, cranial injuries, and hemorrhaging, so her likelihood of survival was deemed extremely low. Dr. Iram proposed utilizing the mechanite augments to stabilize her and offer her a chance of survival, thanks to assistance from Preserver.
Convenient.
The medical team agreed, And so after 29 hours, 17 pieces of mechanite technology were implanted across Dr. Nussbaum's body.
Wonder if she's gonna end up with wings and a mask like the Queen did.
When she finally awoke 32 hours later, she first whispered for water, and then said that she cannot see. She only remembers the ceiling collapsing, but asks if the archaeological team is okay. Iram says that they made it out fine, but she wasn't so lucky. She then says that she cannot feel her legs or arms, and asks Iram what happened. He explains that she was going to die, so they replaced her shattered body with mechanite prosthetics. Her immune system integrated with them seamlessly, and it was like they came to life, working to repair the damage done. Nussbaum begins to hyperventilate and swear, asking if she looks like a monster now. Iram tries to calm her down, explaining that she would have died, and if she didn't, she would have laid here for 3 agonizing years to recover, eventually having to relearn how to walk, sit, breathe, all while in pain for the rest of her life.
Yeah, but you didn't give her the choice, right? Like, you did it against her will. You didn't give her the opportunity to say, yeah, I would like to do this or not.
He understands how she feels, that she'll never be the same. But flesh is weak.
Abby. Excuse me. Could it be a situation? I mean, I guess it depends on how integrated the mech and technology becomes. But couldn't it just be used potentially as like a stopgap system to help repair the body, and then slowly they could take some of the bionics away and let the body heal, you know? But it could be a situation where once they're in there, they're integrated. As he stated, it kind of blended with her immune system, and then the healing process kicked into full gear.
And with her new body, she'll be on her feet in a week or less. She may not ever be the same, but she'll be better. He finishes by telling her to get some rest, and for what it's worth, he doesn't think she looks like a monster. The implant.
It would be hard for me to rest again, not being able to see. Like, I don't know, man. But for me, it's kind of hard to imagine what it would be like kind of being blind in this. Like, I mean, obviously, like, you shut your eyes, you can't see, right? But then the idea of, like, I guess, you know, how would there be times where you'd be able to decipher being awake and here in reality and what is a dream state or something like that? You know what I mean? So like, and then when you add onto that her situation of then having technology, foreign and advanced technology integrated into her and what that's going to do to her, you know, like, I don't know. It would be hard for me if I was in her situation to be able to like go back to sleep like that. You know what I mean?
Are works of art, with the spine support spread like a pair of wings, making her look like an angel.
Yeah, we're going to rewind that real quick.
The implants are works of art, with the spine support spread like a pair of wings, making her look like an angel.
Yep.
It ended up taking her 2 weeks to recover, but her recovery provided the medical team plenty of insight into the enhancements offered by the mechanite augmentations. They integrated with her immune and nervous systems, offering fine, instinctual control and an increase in healing speed. Due to the relative lightness of the foulade material, her body mass did not considerably change, but her strength, lift capacity, running speed, pull weight, and a suite of other measurements vastly increased. She also reported significant increases in her sensory ability, well beyond that of her former Foundation implants. Finally, the spinal brace and its external portion, a pair of retractable wings, allow her a limited but notable ability to glide on strong updrafts.
That'd be dope.
She eventually declined an offer of a desk position. Instead,
I mean, it would, dude. It would be hard. Like, you know, when you think about like reality, right? It's very possible that in the next 10, 20, I would say between the next, potentially, it depends on how like technology advances and stuff like that, but like within the next probably 10 to 50 years, I would say it could be very possible with like stuff like the Neuralink stuff that Elon's developing and potentially other technologies that we don't necessarily know about, like having cybernetic implants and prosthetics being a real thing and them being able to be made in a way that actually does enhance our natural abilities, you know, like having arms made of carbon fibers that are extremely light and durable, but would also make us stronger, you know, and the fact that it is metal would mean that our body doesn't necessarily need to, you know, maintain it as such. You would need to have oxygen going into your arm and prosthetic hand. You know, you could get ocular implants that would allow you to see better and in different spectrums of light. Things that could let you hear better. Feelings of, you know, touch and taste and things like that could be improved. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a lot of this stuff really could potentially become to like an actual reality in the future, you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's weird to think about. Like I'm very much the kind of person where I wouldn't want to have like implants and chips and other things like that put into my body, but at the same time it's also undeniable that like there are ways that those things could be very much viewed or could be used to just improve the human body. You know what I mean? Like you could say that, yeah, we're enhancing humanity by integrating technology into us, but then it kind of becomes a point where are we humans anymore? Are we something else? Is that actually beneficial to our evolution, or would that actually retract from our evolution? You know what I mean? Like, is it a shortcut in certain ways to another evolutionary path? I don't know. That gets into like a whole other kind of philosophical topic and discussion, but it's something that I do just think about from time to time, you know. But anyway,
choosing to continue her work as the Amon Iram project co-lead.
right,
Dr.
exactly.
Iram was reprimanded for his unauthorized.
And it's like, yeah, when like you talk about technology like that, right? Like, how integrated would that be in certain things? Like, could that technology then be hacked? Could you be made to do things against your own will? You know, what kind of privacy would there even be? Could, like, through technology, people tap into your thoughts and see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, experience what you're experiencing? And then that could get into like the brain dance stuff from Cyberpunk, you know, where people are then wanting to, you know, people are going out there and like murdering or committing kind of like serious heinous crimes and recording them and then selling them so people can experience those situations in like a safe, you know, space, but they're still like a real victim. Someone really died, and you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It gets into all kinds of crazy potential possibilities and stuff. You know what I mean? And like, I don't know. There's definitely pros and cons to everything, but would it be worth it? You know?
Use of potentially dangerous, instead choosing to continue her work as the Amon Iram project co-lead. Dr. Iram was reprimanded for his unauthorized use of potentially dangerous anomalous artifacts on both himself and a colleague, but he was not given disciplinary action. Part of this was due to Nussbaum's expressed gratitude to him, stating that if she had been conscious, she would have consented to the procedure.
Hey, what's up, Couchman?
The two return.
We're on a long haul tonight. We're probably gonna go through this entire 2.5-hour video tonight. So go grab some popcorn, get yourself some snackies and a drink if you want to stick around. We still got a little while left.
To Preserver, who says that it witnessed her accident and she has its sympathies, but it refers to her as Hidara, Emperor Bumaro's wife.
Yeah.
She corrects it, and it pauses for a moment before apologizing. Preserver had...
So that obviously then, goes to say that the implants that the Empress had are those same implants and have then integrated into her. That's why Preserver thinks of that. And then also Bumaro, their implants are now in Amon, I believe, so it thinks of it as him. I don't know.
Helped save her life and had actually seen the structural failure, but failed to warn her in time. It then refers to her as an impressive sight, as she is the first human it has seen with full augmentations, the way it used to be done. Its memories come closer to returning, and it remembers receiving its first augmentation, its left hand, made of a polished red. Moving on, Nussbaum says that they have nearly exhausted the records and cylinders they've found, and they have not explained what happened to the city after it was marched on by the Nalka, the Davites, and the Abominate. They're hoping that Preserver is able to remember something about the event. Preserver actually does remember something, saying that it remembers gargantuan spirit beasts that dwarfed the Colossi and forced them back. It remembers catapults and trebuchets and great siege engines that pelted the buildings with strange glass projectiles. It remembers their confusion and the plague that swept through their ranks like a wildfire. It also remembers the Abominate, lowering the great door to the city with a single spell, and it remembers donning its war armor and leading its liege and his family to safety. It also remembers failing. It has no face or identity to offer for the Abominate, just the name, but it sounds like a singularly powerful individual. Iram says that what happened was tragic, but it still doesn't tell them anything they don't already know. Preserver then opens up its left hand, revealing another cylinder, made of a rougher metal compared to the delicate ceramic of the others. It says that it has looked unto itself, the hundreds of cubits of inscribed steel and tubes that hold its soul. Its mind is spread across the entire Undercity, and in the deepest reaches of itself, it found a shrine. The shrine contained pieces of war armor, meticulously wrapped and preserved, and within them was this cylinder. The chamber had been sealed for centuries, and Preserver has forgotten why it was there, so they'll have to tell it. Nussbaum takes the cylinder and leaves with it, while Iram stays behind with Preserver. Official audio ceases at this point, but some scientific equipment in the area contained some microphones which picked up some more conversation. This audio was not recovered until several months later by chance. Preserver tells Iram that he seeks the ability to command change, and he resents the limitation of his station.
Interesting.
The Fulad throne was forged from the very first sheets of the metal shorn from Mekane's body, and it's more than a symbol of power. It is an instrument of power. It says that Iram has already noticed how his voice carries weight and how he commands attention. When Iram told Nussbaum to take the cylinder while he stayed behind, she didn't even protest. She simply followed his order. Preserver says that when the throne was forged at the dawn of the era, Bumaro's people bowed to it and spread forth across Asia like a gleaming sword. They laid down their lives for their lord, as the throne contains the power to dominate lesser minds. Every time that Iram sits on it, he invokes the memories, the name, and the power of the kings of old. Iram asks why it's telling him this, and Preserver responds that surely he sees the parallel by now. Time is a flat circle, and it swallows its own tail like a sand serpent.
The Ouroboros cycle.
He has seen Bumaro's memories, and he has seen Hadara's wings. Iram turns to leave, saying that this is ridiculous, but Preserver tells him that he seeks to change the world, to make it more accepting of people like himself and her. So did Bumaro.
This is how the Meccans get reborn in modern civilization, essentially.
The voice of the Emperor is his now, so he shouldn't squander it. The following day, the team prepares to test the cylinder provided to them by Preserver. Nussbaum tells Iram, however, that she would like to handle this one, as she now has far more mechanite implants than Iram, and they may help her to see more. Iram isn't so sure, as they're an unexpected variable, and they could interact differently, but Nussbaum says that they won't know until they try. Iram
Why not have both of you guys do it at different times?
Still isn't convinced, and Nussbaum asks if he's alright, saying that he's acting strange. But he says it's fine, she can do it, but she should be safe. Nussbaum sits on the throne and activates the cylinder, reacting far less severely than Iram's first time. She says that she's standing on the walls of the city, along with hundreds of soldiers and gun turrets. She can feel herself barking out orders, and the soldiers are obeying, setting up siege engines, loading ammunition, evening out the wall. She is wearing elaborate armor, and says that she is not a Bumaro, but a woman, olive-skinned and small. She's the female general, and she sees a colossus in the distance, shaking the entire city with each step. It's heading towards the horizon, towards a horde of bodies, armor, banners, and mounts amidst a dust storm. The horde goes as far as the eye can see, and there's nothing they can do to stop their advance. The scene then shifts, showing the city on fire. The sky is red, choked with smog, and all she can hear is the clashing of steel and screaming. She's crouched behind a barricade, and she hears buildings collapsing and mortar fire. The enemy looks like beasts and monstrosities, great masses of flesh and limbs in a sickly pale purple, dragging themselves along. Spirits are in the air, and purple fire covers the walls. She can hear the beating of their drums, and their war chants, and cannon fire beyond the walls. She can just barely make out the colossi and the horizon through the smoke, and the streets are wet with blood and slime. Now she's standing over the ruins of a house hit by a mortar. There's an object in the center, and when one of the men touched it, it broke open, and his face burst into leaves. There are vines spreading outward from him, creeping from his writhing corpse towards them.
Jesus.
It's the petrified plant they found in the Undercity, a biological weapon. They retreat into the Undercity, with the Legion holding the entrances and choke points against the swarms. She's surrounded by death, and she splits a man open, chin to groin, followed by beheading one of the flesh beasts. Blood pools in the golden channels of her sword and splashes across her armor. Iram tells her to focus on the Emperor, and the scene changes to the palace as the city is shaking. The Legion is holding the palace against the Horde, as Bumaro sits on the throne. She tells him that they must leave, as the enemy has taken 3 of the gates, and they will not have a chance for much longer. Bumaro instead stands up, wearing his war armor, and says that she must go, calling her Shahashna. It's a word they're not familiar with, but seems similar to the words for protect or guard. Bumaro says that she must go and activate the kiss, but the two begin to argue. She says that the kiss is dangerous and that it has no control mechanism. Bumaro tells her that they have no other choice and says that he commands it. She bows, and Bumaro says that he will go and seat himself in the courtyard, and this keep will not be breached while he draws breath. She then sees him sitting in the same spot as the statue they found, waiting with sword and spear in hand. Iram realizes that it's not a statue after all.
Actually him.
Nussbaum then says that she has left the palace and is now running across the city to the nearest Undercity entrance. Much of the horde has entered the city, and she slaughters as many as she can as she runs. She guts another beast, followed by crushing the skull of a Covenant summoner. Finally, she reaches the Undercity and seals the entrance behind her. It's different here. Brightly lit and well signed, although blood plasters the walls and corpses line the passageways. She proceeds deeper and deeper into the labyrinth, encountering the plant virus and the mutated flesh pod tentacles, alive and throbbing. There are many of their soldiers moving through the Undercity, confused, and there are many families hiding out down here, but she cannot help them. She recognizes the route she's on, and realizes that she is progressing towards Preserver's chamber under the palace. When she arrives, she finds only masses of machinery with no Preserver. The room hums with an unfamiliar energy, and there are automata everywhere, maintaining the machine. She seals the chamber behind her and hears a boom from above, and she begins to strip off her armor. She realizes now what Shahashna means. It means one who guards.
She becomes a
preserver. Yep. She reaches out and touches the machinery, and suddenly Nussbaum's eyes begin to glow, and she writhes on the throne, her back arching wildly. When she stops, she says that when she touched the machine, she felt complete agony, like someone was cutting her limb from limb. Now she sees only rubble and debris with no noise. She is now inhabiting one of the automata, and she emerges back onto the city streets. She finds everyone dead, with not a free patch of dirt to be found as corpses choke the streets. Dead bodies cover every possible surface, ranging from citizens to mechanized soldiers to the horde. Nussbaum asks, what has she done? And although Iram says that it's just a memory, she says that she destroyed the Empire trying to save it. They cut the power to the throne, but nothing happens until Iram pulls Nussbaum away from it. She thanks him and says that it was overwhelming, but it's no wonder that Preserver cannot remember, as she obliterated her own civilization while trying to save it. She had a taste of that feeling for just a few seconds, but it was too much, while Preserver has lived with that guilt for nearly 3,000 years.
Interesting. So it's the kiss is... Okay. So the Emperor, or the Mechan's kiss is supposed to be like a teleportation machine, right? And so it sounds like she went down there to activate it. In order to activate and use it, it requires her to be integrated into the machine, right? And so it sounds like through the process of her being integrated in it, which was extremely painful, it activated the machine, maybe sent the city to a different dimension, but in so doing, killed everyone there. I think that's what that's indicating, right? So, damn. Now, I guess the question is, like, what happened to everyone? Like, during the teleportation process, did they just get vaporized? I mean, it seems not to be the case, right? Because after it activated, I mean, I'm just trying to think of what happened, right? Because they claim it's a teleportation device, it activated, and then the next thing we know is that there's just corpses everywhere. So, was it a teleportation thing? Did the act of it teleporting kill them? Kill everything that was in the city? Was that intentional? You know what I mean? Right? Like, I don't know. Hopefully we'll find out, but sometimes SCP stories have a way of leaving a lot of that open. Anyway.
Nussbaum guesses that Preserver placed her memories into the cylinder to get rid of them, but now she's forgotten why she did so in the first place.
She didn't want to live with the guilt.
Further testing was temporarily halted until a decision could be made on whether or not to inform Preserver of her past. Iram writes a personal log discussing the decision. It reads, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah. Or maybe it was a situation where more than one being was probably supposed to integrate into it, right? Kind of like how in Pacific Rim, you know, the Jaegers are supposed to be piloted by more than one person because the neural link and load is too much for one body to handle. It could be a situation like that where maybe Mech and Skis was supposed to be run by multiple people, but they didn't have anyone else, and so the process of her being linked into it is what made it so violent and not necessarily controllable, you know? And so, like, the random activation may have just the side effect of the random activation and it going to that pocket dimension or whatever that they ended up in, just happened to kill everything that was in the vicinity of, you know, the city when it teleported, you know? I don't know.
Preserver has been integral to the success of the Amon Iram initiative, far more so than any of the O5s arbitrating on whether she deserves to know her own identity. We wouldn't even have the throne if she hadn't led us to it and provided the fist, the cylinders, everything. We owe her. And even if we didn't, it's the right thing to do. Mad scientist is possibly one of the dumbest stereotypes of all time. Scientists have ethics. Even in Prometheus, where progress was done for the sake of progress, we had ethics. Expectations of behavior and morality. Making sure everyone knew exactly what they were signing up for. Not withholding crucial discoveries fundamental to their sense of being. The Foundation is not scientists. It is bureaucrats, and bureaucrats are the ones who will do away with ethics for efficiency. I shouldn't get this mad, but it just begs so many questions. It's representative of how they think of this project. Not a font of tools to improve the world, but of information that needs to be suppressed and released when the world is ready. Visionaries do not wait for the world to be ready to present their idea, because the world is never ready. We force the world to change. In the 60s, augments were a rarity in the Foundation. Agents who got them were freaks. They were a last resort to maintain functionality. Then they realized we were better, faster, smarter, stronger. And look at us now. A project and 2 sites staffed entirely by augmented personnel. But they obviously don't trust Preserver, because she's a machine. Even though she's not, really. She was human once, but they can only think of her as a machine, to use, to exploit. The same way they think of me, and Hedvig, and Tens, and Zaid, and all the others. They don't trust us either. Not really. We've done more for them and gotten fuck all in return, except the permission to rebuild what has been our home for nearly a year.
Dropping the F-bomb here, Exploring Series.
It's frustrating. I've been thinking about what SCP-001A1 said. About the throne. It's not true. There's no paratechnology that can force a psychic connection.
Well, and I feel like that's how new things are in general with that, right? Like, because it's not normal, and then it's not normal, right? And then you also have people who will be jealous of those improvements and augmentations because, you know, they can just perform and do things that no ordinary human could do, or they can do them things that ordinary people could do just at a greater capacity, speed, efficiency, whatever. So a lot of people will be seeing that as better than, and then seen as jealous. And then, you know, again, like in sporting events, right? Like, obviously, it would be seen as like cheating if someone, you know, was a quarterback with some kind of augmented arm that would allow him to throw further, better, faster than, you know, a normal human quarterback could with just a regular arm, kind of a thing, you know? So at first, it'll always be something that people would look down upon, but then as the technology would progress and become, you know, I guess potentially more profitable as well, it would eventually start to get integrated more into society and become more normal. And then not only would it become more normal, be something that would be like, you don't do this, you're just a normal human. You know what I'm saying? You know?
That would require a staggering amount of power and all sorts of bullshit. But it makes me wonder. I've been probing Nussbaum, seeing if she responds like Preserver said she would. I don't know whether I'm delusional or looking for what I want to see, but I feel like there's something there. She just agrees to whatever.
Hmm.
If it is true.
And so, yeah, like, again, that's. So it almost seems like Bomaro and his abilities that he was given for mecking with the throne essentially is able to just override anyone's will. He gives them the command and they follow it. So is there free will among the Meccans? You know, is that one of the reasons why, I guess, I don't know, right? Like, it's the idea of like having multiple minds and wills coexisting together and clashing with each other, but that leading to certain kinds of levels of progression, right? Like, I mean, like, you look at World War II, for all of the tragic things and death that happened during World War II, a lot of today's technology and advancements has its roots in World War II. And you can't really deny that conflict in humanity breeds innovation, you know? So, like, there's that aspect of I guess kind of like evolution. Conflict, you know, stems to the survival of the fittest kind of idea of evolution. But then there's also the idea, you know, I guess potentially with the Meccans of like one united mind, one united purpose, right? Like, what would humanity look like today if all of human civilization was truly united with one purpose, one ideal to advance in whatever way that would be? You know, where would humanity be if we weren't fighting amongst each other, if there weren't wars? You know, where would we be? Would we be out there among the stars and exploring the universe in other ways? And what would we have learned and discovered, essentially? You know, like, would it be better? Would it be worse? Would it be worth giving up our potential individuality and wills for? I mean, again, this is getting into all kinds of philosophical, you know, topics, but that seems to kind of be, I guess, where maybe the Meccan civilization went in certain ways. Maybe they had some kind of, I guess, individuality in some ways, but when their emperor gave a command, they had no choice but to follow it. It's what it seems like, you know?
And I'm not saying it is. it would logically extend to the others too. Did they all agree to swapping out their augments with the mechanite ones because it was what they wanted?
Because of what you told
Or
them.
was it because it was what I wanted them to do?
Right.
Eventually, the O5 Council decided to allow them to tell Preserver about her part in the siege itself, but to withhold the details of her activation of Mekane's kiss and the destruction of the city. Nussbaum and Iram head back to Preserver and tell her that they've witnessed the events contained in the cylinder. When Nussbaum says that she was the one to use the throne, Preserver remarks on it, but after a pause, says that it isn't a problem. Nussbaum says that they encountered the memories of a female general in the Legion, likely favored by Bumaro due to their close personal relationship.
Huh.
They tell her.
Interesting. So, I mean, right, like, is the general they're talking about a queen? Is this the queen that Bumaro had, or is this some kind of mistress or lover that he had? Huh.
Her that they saw the city besieged by a united force of the Nalka and the Covenant of the Deva, as well as an appearance by the Abominate.
Yeah.
The Mechanite Legion was away.
Yeah, I mean, that is sad views, right? Like, again, it's a situation where it's like, is he's removing their choice, their will, you know? Yeah. And then him, like, yeah, coming to that realization of, like, understanding that, but also, like, understanding the kind of responsibility that would have, because, like, you're then literally responsible for the lives of all of those things. But then at the same time, right, like, you could also view that then as just like a numbers game where, like, you're the king. As long as you live, your memories live, all that stuff is preserved. No one else and nothing else really matters. And they're just there to fulfill your wishes, right? You're the actual central core. And as long as you live, your memories live, whatever are preserved, that's all that really matters, because you are the society and everything else around you. It's kind of like, you know, worker bees versus the queen bee. You know, the queen bee is what makes the hive run, and they all basically revolve around, you know, doing their part to keep the hive going. But without the queen, the hive dies. But it's kind of the opposite, you know, in some ways, where it's, you know, Romaro, as long as his memories and whatever can exist, be preserved, and then integrated into another human, the Mechanites will always be around and, you know, come to be kind of a situation, you know?
Marching on Adatum at the time, and so the Colossi and home army were not enough to defend the city. Preserver asks if she served her empire, and Iram says that she did, as she was instrumental in the defense of the city. He goes on to say that she tried to evacuate Bumaro and Hadara, but he sent her away on a different mission. Nussbaum is worried that he's going to ignore the O5 directive, but he tells Preserver that she was told to hold the north gate at all costs to give the civilians a chance to escape the destruction. As the Horde swept over the walls and slaughtered everything in their path, she held the gate against 1,000 more sorcerers, and spirits, and flesh beasts. And she's the only reason that some people escaped the massacre.
Hell of a warrior.
Preserver is shocked to hear that Mechanites still walk the earth today, and thanks Iram and Nussbaum for revealing this. We're then provided an email that was left unsent, written by Nussbaum to a colleague. In the email, she writes that she has some concerns about her project co-lead, Dr. Iram. She admits that he possesses a once-in-a-lifetime mind, but recent events have made her question his position, worrying that he has let his emotions compromise the integrity of the project. He made an unconsensual medical decision on her behalf. He's augmented himself with experimental technology, and utilized experimental anomalous technology to further research. He engaged in an argument with an O5, referred to a sapient anomaly by name, has spent long periods of time alone with this anomaly, has spent long periods of time alone with experimental technology attempting to deconstruct it, has focused research in strange directions averse to the goals of the project, and has demanded an additional level of dedication and respect from employees to the project and himself. As mentioned, the email was never sent, with only the draft found later. On the same day that this email was drafted, an audio file was recorded from a hidden recording device in Nussbaum's office. Iram had entered into her office at night and muses how much Amon Iram looks like a proper city now. He had just been tinkering with the throne, based on some things the Preserver told him. There's some latent psychokinetic energy emanating from it that has been getting stronger with every use of the throne. He looks out the window at the city, saying that they've built something grand out here, and he's not sure how he's going to go back to bunking on site dormitories after this. He then tells her that he thinks they need to shift gears a bit in terms of what they're focusing on here. They should begin focusing more on the weapons and technology used during the siege to figure out the enemy forces that attacked, and put the mundane archaeology aside for a little while. This upsets Nussbaum, who retorts that the mundane archaeology has already led them to breakthroughs on the technology,
Right, exactly.
And her work is just as important as his.
Yeah, I feel like the more information you would learn from Preserver and the history and everything, the more of an understanding you would actually have of the city and the technology, right? Like, I think it's through the memories and stuff that the Preserver gave them that they were able to even get the cold fusion generators back online and learn about cold fusion, yada yada, So, like, that feels like they would be going in the opposite way. The other thing is, too, is like, I mean, obviously, yeah, you would want to, any kind of advancements, weaponized whatsoever, you would want to take so that you could have them and have an advantage over your enemies against the GOC, against the Chaos Insurgency, Serpent's Hand, any other kind of factions out there that, could threaten the Foundation and could also be useful in containing anomalies. But I also feel like with the Foundation, they might start meddling again with wanting to, I guess, potentially use these technologies in ways that could destroy anomalous creatures or things that could have side effects and things that they aren't prepared for and could cause more problems than they're ready for, because that's kind of typically what happens with the Foundation.
He agrees, but she doesn't believe him, stating that he only sees the history and culture as a means to an end, and cannot understand why someone would want to study it for its own sake. Despite his claims that he respects her and her work, she continues, wondering why he feels he can come in here and tell her what her team should focus on, and why he thinks he can make decisions about her body for her. He doesn't regret saving her life, though, and says that this argument is obviously about something bigger. She doesn't dispute that she's thankful for saving her from dying, but she doesn't owe him anything. Iram responds that he's the leader here, so everyone here owes him. If it wasn't for him, this project would have been shuttered months ago. Everyone else here looks up to him for the risks he's taken, so why doesn't she? Nussbaum says that they are friends, and she doesn't look up to friends. They are equals.
Interesting.
Iram's...
So it's at one point in time, he had the ability to kind of command her. almost. But now, whether it's because of the fact that she sat on the throne and got those memories, or because maybe the technology is integrated with her more, she has changed her point of view to where she sees herself as more as an equal to him. So now he doesn't have that commanding presence over her anymore or something. That's kind of interesting. I wonder what it is. If it's the fact that she sat on the throne has now made her immune to its influence. I find that's probably the more likely scenario. But it is also fascinating that it could be like a cognitive thing where now that she sees herself as more of an equal to him, he can no longer have command over her. Like, what if that's kind of part of how the mechan technology works? Your belief in something influences how the technology works with you, right? Like, if you believe the emperor is above you and you have to listen to them, whatever the emperor commands, you will do, no questions asked. But if you believe you're on equal terms with the person, then they cannot, force their will on you. That would also be kind of an interesting idea if that's how their technology like works.
Voice suddenly changes and booms out, stating that she doesn't look up to friends, they are equals. Iram's voice suddenly changes and booms out, stating that kings don't have equals. He continues by saying that her work has been secondary and she is secondary. The purpose of the initiative was to find the technology of the Mechanites, and their history was ancillary. They have a living archive of their history now, so the directive of the project has changed. Nussbaum hazily asks what's happening, seeming to be semi-conscious, and Iram tells her not to resist him. She felt its presence when she sat on the throne, as they have now drawn the attention of something larger than them. Its eyes have settled onto them for the past year, but now they have its name, the Abominate.
Oh.
Nussbaum, on the verge of tears, tells him that—
Wait. That could be interesting. What if the Abominate never left the city, it got in there, and it integrated with the city and or potentially even Mechan itself, and has corrupted it in some way? Interesting.
That he's scaring her. He responds that she should be more scared of other things, like that unsent email on her laptop. He tells her not to ask how he knows, as it's not her place, but she should delete it. After a short pause, he booms out again that she should delete it, and the sound of a keyboard is heard. Afterwards, he says that she has played the role quite well, but she feels it watching them too. She admits that she felt something, and he says that there are bigger things at stake now, and she will obey him. Sometime later, Iram meets privately with Preserver, who says that she can sense that he has used the voice, a booming command that demands obedience. Iram says that even if he hasn't made anyone do anything that they wouldn't have done anyway.
Sure about that,
Preserver
Martin?
says that she makes no judgment, as this was not an unintended result. She asks him what he's used it for, and he says that he's just explored the limits of it to see how it works. Preserver knows that he came here to discuss something else though, and Iram asks if Hadara loved Umaro. Preserver says that of course she did, and she was his most favored wife, mother of his heir. She was pure, rising above the horizon with the sun, and she attended to him until he was unable to speak, or breathe, or eat. When he faded, she called upon his wisdom while her son grew into the throne. Preserver asks him if he has made her his queen, and he supposes so, although he wouldn't use the word queen. Preserver wonders why not, as surely he can see the parallels, that time is a flat circle. Iram says that he is not a king, but Preserver says neither was Bumaro until he was given a city of people that needed guidance. They were simple farmers before, but Mekane's arrival turned them into a king and queen, their home into a bastion, and their kin into the pinnacle of humanity. The people of Amon Iram were not different because of the augmentations, but instead they chose to be different, and chose to elevate themselves because they were dissatisfied with the way things were. Dissatisfaction is the mother of ambition, and the coal that fuels the fire. There is no shame in dissatisfaction with this form, and we should strive to improve ourselves, as the flesh is weak. They improve Mekane by collecting her component parts scattered to the winds, and they improve their bodies by replacing their frail limbs and senses. In doing both, they improve their souls, and in this way, they do not change the world around them, but improve it. Iram then admits that he lied to Preserver, but she says that she already knew. She served her liege honorably for a lifetime and more, and she can see his face in Iram's. She can see the lines of worry, and knows that he was holding back the truth. She did not save this city. Iram says that Bumaro told her to go and activate Mekane's kiss, but she says that's impossible, as it was unfinished and would have destroyed the city. Iram says that the city was destroyed, but she says that she couldn't have activated it as there was no control interface. Iram tells her that Bumaro gave her something, a blessing, that she drank and touched the machinery, fusing with it somehow.
Right.
She became the control mechanism and fired it, teleporting the city from the Sinai to the Arabian desert, killing everyone inside of it in the process. Preserver falls silent for several moments, and eventually says that with her metal mind, she should be able to process anything, but not this. She was a general of the Golden Legion, and she damned her city and her people. She says that she is at the center of her own hell, but Iram's voice suddenly booms out again, telling her to listen. He tells her that she failed and could not save the city, and because of her, it collapsed into devastation and disrepair, disappointing her once and future masters. But it's not too late.
Damn, that's a little harsh. That's a little harsh, brother. Like, for 3,000 plus, like, she lived with the guilt for so long that she literally plucked the memory from her cognitive functions and put it into a disk and stored it away for someone else to look at in the future. So the information wouldn't be lost, but so she didn't have to deal with that guilt. Now that it's been reintegrated in her, you're sitting there like, brother, you failed. Not only did you fail, you really failed. You fucked up. Like, it's your fault that everyone died. That's a little rough, but I guess let's see where this is going. He's about to say something else.
Pointing her once and future masters. But it's not too late, and they can still fix it and bring back Amon Iram.
I mean, it's the truth, but at the same time, he forced her to do it. So technically, it's his fault. He's the one that probably used the voice and gave her no, like, real option but to do this. So she was only following what he told her to do. And the machine, from what they're saying, was never completed. Whether or not her integration into it completed it, you know, or not, that's, I guess, a question that's left up to interpretation. Maybe it was the integration of her that was the last component needed, but she was still never, like, I guess, properly trained in how to use it. So it's like, what are you going to do? She successfully teleported the city, but everyone died in the process, you know? But she was only doing what he commanded her to do.
And they can still fix it and bring back Amon Iram. He asks her what she's prepared to give up. And after a slight pause, she responds with everything. Sometime later, another update meeting was scheduled with 0511 following a general decrease in quantity of technology and archaeological reports being transmitted. 0511 comes to Iram's office and tells him that he's worried about the pace of reporting from both him and Nussbaum. He's starting to think that the project has run its natural course, but Iram argues that there's still so much more to decipher here about their history and culture. 0511 wonders why he's suddenly interested in those things, and says that it's always been about the technology here. Iram has done his job phenomenally, and they've had Foundation researchers poring over every report to see how they can put it into practice. Iram says that that's just the Foundation, but 0511 says that they have a responsibility to maintain normalcy. They already have people in India and China looking around for the locations of the other two cities, and it's time to move on from Amon Iram. The personnel here will be reassigned to any project of their choosing with glowing recommendations, but Iram asks what if they'd rather stay here, as many won't want to leave. 11 says that he can't presume to speak for everyone, but Iram says that he's their leader, and they look up to him. 11 tells him that either way, they won't have much say in the matter, and the rest of the council agrees with him. Iram, however, says no, he's not going, as Amon Iram was lost once because of people who didn't understand what it had to offer, and he's not going to let that happen again. He's not some dog that the council can shove around from project to project. 0511 asks if he's forgotten who he's talking to, as he can have him terminated, but Iram says that maybe that's true out there, but not here, in his city. The bodyguards with 0511 raise their rifles at Iram, but he uses his booming voice to command them to lower their weapons, which they do.
That's kind of pimp, I'm not gonna lie.
He says that Amon Iram has far too much to offer to throw it away, used and spent. He commands 0511 to go to the council and tell them that the project will continue. 11 simply responds that he has an inch-thick telekill plate in his cranium, which prevents any sort of psychic influence, and orders his guards to kill him. As the guards raise their guns again, they're each shot in the back of the head by a number of cloaked soldiers, the tactical response team that are now utilizing mechanite technology.
Yikes.
11 says that Iram can't kill him without signing his own death warrant, but Iram responds that he's not going to kill him, as he's not a monster. Instead, Nussbaum descends from above, wearing the intricate war armor as seen in the visions, and she glides down to a soft landing, wielding a curved golden sword. Iram tells her to take 0511 and toss him out of the city, to let him run back to the council. 11 says that he's insane, as no one can take on the Foundation and win. Iram says that he's not a supervillain. He has no interest in destroying the Foundation. He's just an engineer that sees a problem on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, we're not done with this conversation here yet. Obviously, there's a little more, but I feel like, you know, 11 from the 05 could have done things a bit more diplomatically, you know? I mean, like, obviously, after seeing him being able to influence people, you would think after however many years of them being an O5 council member and part of the foundation and all that stuff there, they would realize what's going on and that they don't really have control of the situation anymore and would be a little bit more diplomatic about it and not try to like threaten him. I don't know. I feel like there still could have been a chance for him to be like, all right, fine. Yeah, you can continue to be here and research whatever. And, maybe they could have still benefited from some more information and technology that could have come from there, or he could have at least gone out of there safely and then could have, figured out what they wanted to do from there. I don't know. I feel like he played that kind of poorly. But obviously, Umaru has like really kind of seemed to have integrated into Amon, and the Meccan civilization seems to be coming back to life.
He needs to act before the Foundation gets all of them killed. With that, Nussbaum grabs 11 and flies him out of the city. An Overwatch Command emergency session was called to address the events in Amon Iram, and they took to vote on whether or not to scramble several task forces in the region and use military force to regain control of the city. 9 of the 13 council members voted yes on the issue, with even the administrator of the Foundation chiming in to agree as well. A task force consisting of 3 MTFs, Nine-Tailed Fox, Hammer Down, and the Mole Rats were sent in, totaling 83 personnel equipped with small and heavy arms and in armored personnel carriers.
Makes me wonder why they wouldn't send in Samsara, right? Like, I would think that this would deem worthy of that type of level, but I mean, maybe these MTF task force that they're sending in are better equipped to deal with that kind of situation.
At the entrance to the city, they find
maybe they feel like the technology aspect of Samsara, maybe they could be like hacked or taken over by the mech and stuff. I don't know.
A curved sword impaled into the sand, with one member totaling 83 personnel equipped with small and heavy arms and in armored personnel carriers. At the entrance to the city, they find a curved sword impaled into the sand, with one member commenting that Iram is not very subtle. Suddenly, Iram's voice comes over their radios, telling them to stay back and that they're on the same side. Overwatch Command tells them to continue, however, and they see a number of figures standing along the massive walls of the city. Several more figures are flying overhead, dipping and swerving through the air. Aram's voice then booms on their radios, commanding the MTFs to hear him. They all become dazed momentarily, and Iram says that he made a mistake with 0511, and he's learned since then. The MTFs change the frequencies of their radios and cut Iram off, continuing forward towards the city. The figures on the walls can now be seen to be armed with a mixture of swords, polearms, and long-range rifle-like weapons, all pointed at the advancing force. The MTF tells Command that these are unfavorable conditions for a firefight, but they continue forward. Aram's voice is heard again, mixed with static, and he explains that they found another cylinder after 11 was kicked out, inside of the statue's hands. It's Bumaro's last testament, and he begs them to stand down, as they don't understand the threat of the Abominate. It's not a person, it's a force of nature, like a hurricane. They cannot fight it, and they need him. It
makes me wonder if the Abominate's like 682, right? But at the same time, they'd mentioned that the Abominate broke down the walls with some kind of spells. That would lend me to believe that it's more of a person. And I'm trying to think of what other SCP, if anything, the Abominate could be. And I wonder if we're going to find out. I don't know.
MTF tells him that they'll place him and Nussbaum into custody, and then they can plead their case to the council. Iram says that bureaucrats never listen to the visionaries, and when the MTF gives Iram one last chance to stand down, he refuses. At that point, 24 figures crest the sand dune from the other side, 3 to 4 meters tall in hulking golden exosuits of plated armor. The 2 in the middle are the largest, with one being intricately designed, piloted by Iram, and another appearing to be made of stone, holding a sword and spear. Iram says that they might not listen to reason, but they will not stop him from changing the world and saving it. When this is over, they will beg him for his help. Cannon fire begins to rain down on the MTFs as they dive for cover and return fire at the warsuits. The warsuits use a mix of brute strength and oversized ranged weaponry to break the MTF's line, although automatic cannons from the APCs have considerable effect on destroying the warsuits.
Yeah, I would think so.
The reactor cores from the fallen units eject, however, causing miniature explosions. Iram booms out at his soldiers to not fail their king, but gradually the superior maneuverability of the MTFs begins to turn the tide. They lose some.
It's interesting that modern day technology, well, I guess, you know, it is MTFs, right? So they probably actually have more advanced stuff. But when you think of an APC, you think of them just using, you know, modern shells, but maybe they have some shells that, you know, are specifically made to deal with anomalous things. So maybe they're able to punch through the suits and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting that the suits, I would have thought the suits would have been able to put up more of a defense against some of this stuff, being the mech and technology is so advanced, you know, cold fusion, etc. But perhaps not.
Some personnel in the process, but managed to wreck or disable a similar number of the warsuits. Overhead, a number of the flying mechanites begin to dive bomb the soldiers, grabbing them and pulling them into the air. Moments later, however, an anti-aircraft emplacement begins firing, sending a number of the flying units crashing to the ground. Nussbaum is one of the flying individuals, however, and proves to be considerably faster and more evasive than the others. Iram orders her to pull back and go ensure that Preserver is ready. She rockets away from the scene at extremely high speeds, as Iram picks up a portion of a destroyed warsuit and heaves it at an anti-aircraft emplacement, crushing it and its operator. The rest of the warsuits begin to pull back towards the city. The MTFs continue to fire on them, but then the ground begins to shake under their feet. Iram commands the Colossus to hear him and to defend its city.
I don't know what the MTFs
Suddenly,
are
a
doing
massive hand reaches out of the sand, followed by another, with its fingers wrapping around the wall of the city. A metal golem, easily 100 meters tall and covered in auto turrets, drags itself out of the sand and turns to face the Foundation soldiers. The MTFs immediately begin to panic, and Overwatch Command orders a tactical retreat, telling them that heavy armament and air support has been scrambled and is waiting outside of the entrance to the reality bubble. The Colossus, however, takes a single step and crushes a number of both Foundation and Mechanite personnel.
Yikes.
Several buildings in the city shake from the impact, and Iram raises his sword to the sky, saying that this is how it should be. Nussbaum then reappears, perching herself on Iram's shoulder, and tells him that they are ready. The Colossus continues to move towards the Foundation personnel, who fire rockets and machine guns at it to no effect. Iram comes in again over their radios, and says that they didn't accept his help. They used and threw away this city, but Iram saw something beautiful in it, and brought it all back to life. He will protect the world from the abominate on his own terms, as the Foundation is a relic. If the human race is to survive what is to come, they will need to adapt, to change, and to improve. He says that his name is Robert Bumaro, and the world will change for the Church of the Broken God, because it has no choice. Following this, a massive power surge fried the electronics of a waiting aircraft 3 kilometers away. All communication in and out of the reality bubble ceased, and subsequent investigation indicates that the reality bubble no longer exists in the South Arabian desert. It's theorized that they activated Meccane's kiss, teleporting the city elsewhere. Overall, the events in Amon Iram have resulted in the Foundation raising their global threat level, now at a point where there's considerable potential to disrupt the general population. Foundation policy regarding digital and paratechnological implants and equipment has been frozen, pending further review by Overwatch Command. The Church of the Broken God has been designated as a group of interest, and all efforts are to be made to locate Robert Aram/Bumaro and Hedvig Nussbaum and bring them into custody. Laboratory samples of Davite, Nalkin, and Mechanite biological weapons used in the siege of the city have produced some viable specimens and have been given provisional SCP designations. These include SCP-610, the Flesh That Hates, SCP-217, the Clockwork Virus, and SCP-697, a chemical capable of changing almost any type of solid matter into plant-like organisms. Project Forerunner Triad has been organized to address the consequences of the Amon Iram initiative and report directly to the Council. Ascertaining the locations of the Nalka and Davite capital cities, as well as the identity and nature of the entity known as the Abominate, have all been elevated to global priority level Alpha. The Church of the Broken God has been presented in a number of different ways since their initial conception. They've been seen as mysterious enemies to the Foundation that want to convert the whole world to machines, and on the flip side as unlikely allies that want to save the world from the monstrous threat of Sarkicism. Amon Iram presents us a Church of the Broken God that's somewhere in between, I think, with them wanting to be on the same side as the Foundation to fight off a greater foe, but also not seen eye to eye with them. The initial inclusion of a new threat, separate from the Sarkites and the Davites, makes this canon even more unique, and time will tell on what exactly the Abominate is. The most fascinating part about this article, however, is the transformation of Robert Aram into Robert Bumaro, a figure that's long been associated with running the Church of the Broken God. While it remains to be seen on how exactly good he is, he does at least seem to be earnest in his interests of protecting the people of Amon Iram and defending the world from the Abominate. We are likely going to see more material in this canon, but even on its own, it's a fine reboot of the Mechanites and the Broken Church.
For sure. For sure. Okay. Assuming we're not going to get a quote here. No, no quote. All right. Well, there you guys have it. I mean, that was SCP-001, Amon Iram, all parts by the Exploring series. Links, as always, down below in the description to the original video and to the playlist I'll have here, actually, with the original video, and then to the Exploring series channel. So do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, it was a doozy, a long one with a lot of information and a lot to unpack here, but a great one with a lot of great lore. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, be sure to go over there and give it a like, and yeah, if you haven't hit that sub button on the Exploring series channel, be sure to do so and show the man some love and support. I mean, like I said, it's a lot to unpack, but it's a very interesting and detailed kind of origin lore for the Church of the Broken God. I mean, this is kind of what I really had been wanting, as far as more lore and world building on the Meccans, Sarkics, and Davites. I really wanted to learn more about, you know, the ancient civilizations, kind of how they came to be, and the wars that they fought, you know, against each other. We only really get kind of one. I mean, they talk about the different battles and things like that somewhat, but we really only kind of get like one real major battle, and that is obviously the sacking of Amon Iram that happened. And it also only really happened because, like I said, they basically did an old school, you know, StarCraft base trade. The Golden Legion pushed out to destroy the Davite home, I believe, while the Davites and Sarkics had forged an alliance together to sack the Meccans. And then also another fourth party, the Abominant, whoever and whatever that happens to be, happened to attack at the same time and kind of pushed the Meccans into having to use, I guess you could say, an advanced experimental technology to teleport the city from where it was to somewhere else. It seems like the technology was not complete, whether or not the integration of I don't remember the character's name. Like I said, you know, if you've been around the channel for a while, you know I'm bad with names. But, you know, Bramaro had commanded her to become the preserver, essentially. And so that character took something and became integrated with the city itself, and essentially became, you know, the AI of the city to preserve it and keep it. And in so doing, whether it was accidental or not, that's, you know, it could have been an accident, or it could have just been the side effect of the technology. It seems like it's more like it was an accident because maybe the integration wasn't completed. Maybe there needed to be more than one thing integrated into it, or maybe just because the preserver didn't fully understand how to utilize the technology yet, or because maybe they were just simply in a panic at what was happening. But everything that seemed to have been in the vicinity of the city when it teleported was killed. It seems like I said that was an accident, because at the end of the story, obviously, they teleport the city away again. So, I mean, you would think that if they did that and they survived, that they learned how to do it properly. So it seems like that was probably just some kind of accident. But I mean, just the lore and the world building, and, you know, I kind of figured, you know, with them using the throne, that the memories would be reintegrated into him and he would kind of become that character. That's basically what I thought. And then obviously the same thing happened with Nussbaum, her turning into, you know, that great flying warrior, whether it was the queen or not. You know, I don't remember. I thought the queen was the one who looked like the angel. You know, maybe they are the same. I don't, you know, that's a little confused for me. But throughout the whole thing, I was waiting for something more darker to happen. You know, from the previous video with Lord Blackwood, they kind of made it out like there was something terrifying that was going to happen there, you know, but that didn't seem to be the case, you know. It really just seemed to be that they learned about the Meccan civilization, their history, and they essentially helped to reactivate and rebuild the city back up. And so now the Church of the Broken God is out there with this city, this advanced technology. Even though it is advanced, obviously it still seems like the capabilities of the Foundation are able to deal with it. They were able to destroy, you know, a lot of the mech exosuits and things like that. The only thing they didn't seem to have an answer for at the time was, you know, the Colossus. That was the thing that really seemed to turn the tide, obviously, in Bamaro's favor before they poured it away. But yeah, great story about, you know, the origins of the Church of the Broken God. I mean, obviously the big question for me from this is, who and what is the Abominant? I wonder if it's the Scarlet King, you know, or maybe the Abominant is Yaldabaoth itself, you know, because the origin of the creation myth, I guess I should say, of this is that there were 3 of them in the beginning, which you would, you know, Meccan. Yaldabaoth would be the one for the Sarkics, and then I would assume the Scarlet King, because the Scarlet King is always associated with the Davites. So the 3 of them were the first gods, I guess, or at least the first gods to descend to our planet. They warred with each other. Before they descended to our planet, they basically were on equal terms, couldn't kill each other, but wounded each other. They descended to Earth, and then their influence spread from the various people that found them. So maybe the Abominant is, you know, Yaldabaoth itself incarnated into some other kind of being. Maybe it's the Scarlet King, or maybe it's something else completely. You know, I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. Hopefully we will find out more in the future. I assume as we're going along fully more with Red Tape and we explore these other cities, we'll then get the history and background of both the Sarkics and the Davites, and hopefully we'll learn who and what the Abominant is. And so I'm all about this stuff, man. I'm all about this stuff. Again, you know, everything from the Cactus verse with Autopapadopoulos and the demons, and that whole lore building of the ancient world was, you know, some of the most interesting stuff in the SCP, you know, universe that I've gone through so far, you know, with your Ouroboros cycle and all that. And now, you know, this stuff with the Red Tape, I'm digging. I'm definitely into it here. So long video here for you guys. This is, you know, gonna be 3-4 hours long, potentially close to it. So long and good one here for you. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you watch this whole thing all the way to the very end and you're still around, you know, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to watch this all the way through. Thank you guys very much. You know, consider leaving a like and a sub if you enjoyed this video, as it helps me and the channel grow, and it lets me and the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more. If you've been around the channel for a while and you decide you want to take your support to the next level, you know, check out the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. There's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to all that, so you can check all that stuff out. You can get early access to videos, priority to any kind of reaction requests you might have, members only Discord access, etc., etc. So thank you guys very much. Really appreciate you. And I look forward to continuing our journey through Red Tape on the next one. We'll see you guys then.